The universe is vast beyond mortal comprehension, filled with countless worlds where sentient beings look up at the stars and ask the eternal questions: are we alone? What is our purpose? Is there something greater than ourselves? In the 23rd century, humanity had answered those questions with starships, with science, with the cold light of reason that pushed back the darkness of superstition. The United Federation of Planets stood as a beacon of secular humanism. A civilization that had outgrown gods and devils, heaven and hell, choosing instead to forge its own destiny among the stars. But the universe, as Captain James T. Kirk often discovered, had a peculiar sense of irony. The USS Enterprise NCC 1701 hung in the darkness at the edge of the Beta Quadrant, her graceful saucer section reflecting the distant light of binary stars. They were 3 weeks into a survey mission of uncharted space. The kind of routine assignment that never stayed routine for long. On the bridge, Captain Kirk sat in his command chair, chin resting thoughtfully on his fist as he watched the main view screen display sensor data scrolling past in neat columns of numbers. "Anything interesting, Mr. Spock?" Kirk asked without turning his head. At the science station, Commander Spock stood with characteristic stillness, one eyebrow slightly elevated as he studied his instruments. The Vulcan's fingers moved across the controls with practiced precision. "Negative, Captain. Standard stellar phenomena. Hydrogen clouds, trace amounts of ionized particles, nothing that warrants." He paused mid-sentence, his hands freezing over the console. Kirk's posture shifted immediately. In his years serving with Spock, he'd learned that when his science officer stopped mid-sentence, something genuinely unusual had occurred. "Mr. Spock?" "Fascinating." Spock's tone carried that particular quality that meant he'd encountered something that defied his considerable understanding of physics. "Captain. He is simultaneously alive and not alive, according to our instruments." "That's impossible," McCoy said flatly. "Indeed, Doctor. Yet there he is." Kirk stared at the impossible figure on the screen. In his years of exploration, he'd encountered beings of pure energy, ancient machines masquerading as gods, and entities that existed outside normal space-time. But something about this felt different. This felt intentional. "Life support readings?" he asked. "None detected," Spock replied. "No environmental suit, no personal shield technology, no detectable means of survival. He should be dead, Captain. Multiple times over." Kirk's jaw set in that determined line his crew knew well. "Then we'd better get him aboard before he realizes that. Transport a room, lock onto those coordinates and beam that individual directly to sickbay. Security team to sickbay, fully armed. McCoy, get down there and be ready." "On my way." McCoy was already moving toward the turbolift. "Though I'm not sure what medical protocol covers treating someone who's surviving in hard vacuum." As the doctor disappeared into the lift, Kirk kept his eyes on the screen. The figure continued its slow tumble, utterly peaceful, utterly impossible. "Mr. Spock, I want a full analysis of whatever that thing is. And I want to know what kind of energy signature could register as simultaneously alive and dead." "Working on it, Captain." On the view screen, the figure began to shimmer with the familiar sparkle of the transporter beam. In seconds, he was gone, dematerialized and rematerialized deep in the heart of the Enterprise. Kirk stood alone in the center of his bridge, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the empty space where the impossible man had been. He'd learned long ago that the universe was stranger than humanity had ever imagined. But something in his gut, that instinct that had saved his ship a dozen times, told him that this was different. "Already here, Jim?" Dr. Leonard McCoy stepped out of the turbolift, his blue medical tunic a splash of color against the reds and golds of the bridge crew. "I was in sickbay when yellow alert sounded. What have you found this time? Another omnipotent computer? Space amoeba? Greek gods?" "Unknown, Doctor." Spock didn't look up from his sensors. "Though your mention of gods may be more apropos than you intended." McCoy shot Kirk a look that said "here we go again" as clearly as words. Kirk suppressed a smile. After years together, the banter between his science officer and chief medical officer had become as familiar as the thrum of the Enterprise's engines. "Visual on screen," Kirk ordered. The view screen flickered, replacing the sensor data with an image of open space. At first, there seemed to be nothing there, just the usual tapestry of stars against the infinite black. Then Sulu enhanced the image, and they all saw it. Floating in the void was a figure. Not a ship. Not a probe. Not a space-suited astronaut. A man, seemingly unprotected in hard vacuum, tumbling slowly end over end in the darkness. He wore what appeared to be an expensive three-piece suit, dark, impeccably tailored, utterly impossible. No helmet. No environmental protection. Just a man, drifting as peacefully as if he were sleeping in his own bed. "My God!" Uhura whispered. "Magnify," Kirk commanded, rising slowly from his chair. The image zoomed closer. The figure was humanoid male, with dark hair and what appeared to be a handsome face. His eyes were closed. His arms hung loose at his sides. And most impossibly of all, he showed no signs of explosive decompression, no freezing, no radiation burns, none of the immediately fatal effects of vacuum exposure. "Life signs?" Kirk asked quietly. Spock's eyebrow climbed higher. "Contradictory, Captain." Sensors detect cellular activity consistent with life, yet also readings suggesting the absence of life. Sensors are detecting an energy signature bearing 273 Mark IV. However, the signature is contradictory. Contradictory how? Kirk rose from his chair and moved to the science station. The energy readings suggest both matter and non-matter, organic and inorganic, existing simultaneously in quantum superposition. Yet unlike traditional quantum states, there is no waveform collapse upon observation. It simply exists in all states at once. Spock looked up from his instruments. "According to our current understanding of physics, this is impossible." From the helm, Lieutenant Sulu glanced back. "Could it be a sensor malfunction, sir?" "Running diagnostics now." Spock's fingers danced across the controls. "All systems functioning within normal parameters. The anomaly is real, Captain, though I cannot explain what it is." "Distance?" Kirk leaned over the science console, studying the readouts himself even though he understood perhaps 1/10 of what Spock could interpret from them. Approximately 200,000 kilometers and closing. Closing? Kirk's eyes narrowed. On an intercept course? Negative. It appears to be drifting. However, our current trajectory will bring us within 50,000 kilometers within the hour. Kirk made his decision with the swift confidence that had kept his crew alive through 100 first contact scenarios. Yellow alert. Reduce speed to 1/4 impulse. Mr. Chekhov, I want a full tactical analysis of that thing. Uhura, open a hailing frequency on all standard channels. The bridge lighting shifted to a subtle amber as the alert status changed. At the communication station, Lieutenant Uhura's elegant fingers moved across her board. "Hailing frequencies open, Captain." No response on any channel. "Keep trying." Kirk returned to his command chair, settling into it with the easy grace of a man who'd made it his throne. "Bones, report to the bridge." Whoever or whatever they just brought aboard, it was going to change everything. If you want to see more cosmic beings enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. In sickbay, Dr. McCoy stood over the diagnostic bed where the impossible man lay, medical tricorder in hand, frowning at readings that made absolutely no sense. Behind him, 2 security officers stood with phasers drawn but not aimed, watching the unconscious figure with wary eyes. The man was breathing. His chest rose and fell with perfect regularity. His skin showed healthy color. His suit, which should have been frozen solid or burned by radiation, looked as if he just picked it up from the cleaners. McCoy ran the tricorder over him again, hoping for different results. He didn't get them. "Damn it!" he muttered. "This doesn't make any sense." The man's eyes opened. They were dark, impossibly deep, and filled with an ancient weariness that made McCoy take an involuntary step backward. The stranger sat up smoothly, with none of the disorientation that should have accompanied someone who'd just been pulled from hard vacuum. He looked around sickbay with calm interest, taking in the biobed, the medical instruments, the nervous security officers, and McCoy himself. Then he smiled. A charming, slightly wicked expression that somehow made him seem both friendly and dangerous at once. "Well," he said in a smooth British accent that dripped with casual elegance, "this is unexpected." The stranger swung his legs off the biobed with fluid grace, his polished shoes touching the deck with a soft click that seemed too ordinary for someone who just survived impossible conditions. McCoy's hand tightened on his tricorder as the security officers tensed, phasers rising fractionally. "I'd stay right where you are," McCoy said, his southern drawl carrying more authority than threat. "You've just been through something that should have killed you 10 different ways." "I need to run some tests." The man tilted his head, studying McCoy with those impossibly dark eyes. There was something in that gaze, something old and knowing that made the doctor's skin prickle with instinctive unease. "Should have killed me?" The stranger's smile widened. "Doctor, I appreciate the concern, but I assure you, I'm quite well. Better than well, actually. Though I am rather curious about where I am." "You're aboard the USS Enterprise, a starship of the United Federation of Planets," McCoy said, keeping his voice level and professional despite the strangeness of the situation. "I'm Chief Medical Officer Leonard McCoy." "And you are?" The stranger stood, brushing imaginary dust from his perfectly tailored suit. He was tall, not excessively so, but with a presence that seemed to fill the room. "Lucifer," he said simply, as if introducing himself at a cocktail party. "Lucifer Morningstar." "Though I suspect that name won't mean much to you, will it?" McCoy's eyebrow rose. "Lucifer? As in, the devil, yes. The Lightbringer. Fallen Angel. Lord of Hell. Various other titles I've accumulated over the eons." Lucifer said it with the casual air of someone listing items on a resume. "Though I haven't actually ruled hell in quite some time. Bit of a career change, you might say." The security officers exchanged glances. One of them touched his communicator. "Security to bridge. The subject is conscious and claims to be." "I heard." Kirk's voice came back immediately. "I'm on my way. Keep him." "For mortals, certainly. For me, it's more of an inconvenience." Lucifer's eyes sparkled with amusement. "I was traveling between dimensions when something rather rudely interrupted my journey. A massive energy surge of some kind. I found myself tumbling through your space, disconnected from my intended destination." Spock stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back in his characteristic posture. "You claim to be traveling between dimensions. That would require technology or abilities far beyond current Federation capabilities." "Technology?" Lucifer laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. "Oh, I like you already? So logical, so rational?" "No, Commander, not technology. It's simply what I am. Angels, or former angels in my case, exist across multiple planes of reality simultaneously. We can traverse dimensions as easily as you walk through that door." "Fascinating," Spock said, though his tone suggested he found it more improbable than fascinating. "However, your claim to be a celestial being conflicts with basic scientific principles. Angels, devils, and similar entities are mythological constructs created by pre-scientific cultures to explain phenomena they didn't understand." Lucifer's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes, something ancient and vast that made even Spock pause. "Commander, I've been called many things across countless civilizations. Myth, legend, metaphor. But I assure you I'm quite real. And standing right in front of you. Claims are not evidence," Spock replied coolly. "Can you provide proof of your alleged nature?" "Spock," Kirk interjected, his tone carrying a warning. He'd learned to trust his instincts, and every instinct was telling him that this stranger was exactly what he claimed to be, or at least, something far beyond human. Let's approach this diplomatically. Mr. Morningstar. Lucifer, please. Mr. Morningstar sounds like you're addressing my father. And we're not on speaking terms. Kirk nodded, filing that detail away. Lucifer. You said you were traveling between dimensions when an energy surge interrupted you. Do you know what caused it? Lucifer tilted his head thoughtfully. Not precisely. It felt like two incompatible forces colliding. Something from your universe intersecting with something from outside it. Cosmic, powerful, and entirely accidental, I'd wager. He looked around sickbay with renewed interest. Tell me, Captain, what year is this in your calendar? And more importantly, what universe am I in? The year is 2267, Kirk said. You're in what we call the Alpha Quadrant of the Milky Way galaxy, United Federation of Planets territory. As for what universe? He glanced at Spock. If you are indeed from another dimension, Spock said, then you have crossed into our reality, a universe governed by physical laws, natural selection, and scientific principles. There are no verified cases of supernatural phenomena that cannot be explained by advanced technology or evolved abilities. Lucifer's laugh was softer this time, almost sad. No gods? No devils? No higher powers watching over you? He looked at each of them in turn. How wonderfully liberating. And how terribly lonely. McCoy, who'd been watching the exchange with growing fascination, spoke up. You're saying you really are the devil? As in, the biblical devil? Among other interpretations, yes. Though I should clarify, I'm not evil incarnate, Doctor. I don't corrupt souls or damn the innocent. I simply refused to bow to my father's plan, was cast out of heaven for it, and spent several billion years running hell as a punishment. Which, I might add, was terribly boring. Lucifer's expression turned wry. I quit some time ago. Been on an extended sabbatical ever since. Kirk studied him carefully. In his years of command, he developed an ability. Secured, but don't provoke him. Lucifer's attention shifted to the security officers, his expression amused. Provoke me? Gentlemen, I'm the devil, not a wild animal. I'm perfectly civilized. Usually. His gaze returned to McCoy. Now, Doctor, you mentioned tests? I'm afraid you'll find my physiology rather unconventional. I'm not precisely human, you see. I gathered that from the fact that you were floating in hard vacuum without a spacesuit, McCoy said dryly. He raised his tricorder again, scanning more carefully this time. Your cellular structure is reading as both organic and something else entirely. Your body temperature is normal, but you have no detectable metabolic processes. You're breathing, but your lungs show no need for oxygen. Frankly, according to my instruments, you shouldn't exist. Ah. Lucifer's smile turned knowing. That's because I exist outside your conventional laws of physics, Doctor. I'm celestial in nature. Angelic, if you prefer the traditional terminology. The rules that govern mortal flesh don't quite apply to me. The sickbay doors hissed open. Captain Kirk strode in, flanked by Spock, both men taking in the scene with swift, assessing glances. Kirk's eyes locked onto Lucifer, and for a long moment, the two men simply regarded each other. Kirk saw a tall, dark-haired man in an expensive suit who carried himself with absolute confidence. Lucifer saw a compact, powerfully built human with hazel eyes that held intelligence, courage, and the kind of commanding presence that didn't require rank insignia to be felt. I'm Captain James T. Kirk, Kirk said, his tone carefully neutral. You're aboard my ship. So your doctor informed me. Lucifer inclined his head politely. Lucifer Morningstar. A pleasure, Captain. Thank you for the rescue, though I wasn't in any particular danger. Home? Lucifer's smile turned enigmatic. Captain, I haven't had a home in billions of years. Hell wasn't home, it was a prison. Earth wasn't home, It was a distraction. Perhaps this universe is exactly where I'm meant to be. McCoy's communicator beeped. Bridge to sickbay. Captain, we're detecting unusual energy fluctuations in the same area where we found our guest. They're growing stronger. Kirk's jaw tightened. On my way. Spock with me. Bones, keep our guest comfortable. He fixed Lucifer with a stern look. And please don't try to leave this room. Until we understand what's happening, I need you to stay put. Lucifer raised his hands in a gesture of compliance. I'm at your mercy, Captain. For now. As Kirk and Spock headed for the door, Lucifer called after them. Oh, Captain? One more thing. If those energy fluctuations are what I think they are, you might want to raise your shields. Whatever pulled me here might be coming back for another pass. And next time, you might not catch something as friendly as me. Kirk paused at the threshold, looking back. Is that a threat? A warning, Lucifer said seriously. The spaces between dimensions aren't empty, Captain. There are things that live in the cracks between realities. Things that make me look positively angelic by comparison. Kirk held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded curtly and left, Spock following close behind. Alone with McCoy and the security officers, Lucifer settled back onto the biobed, crossing his legs comfortably. Well, Doctor, he said pleasantly, while we wait for whatever cosmic disaster is about to unfold, why don't you tell me about this fascinating future you've built? A humanity without God sounds like my kind of paradise. To read people, to sense when someone was lying or hiding their true nature. Lucifer spoke with such casual honesty that it was either the truth or the most elaborate deception Kirk had ever encountered. Let me get this straight, Kirk said slowly. You're claiming to be a fallen angel who used to rule hell, quit, and was traveling between dimensions when you accidentally ended up in our universe? Precisely. Though I suspect accidentally may not be entirely accurate. The universe has a funny way of putting me where I need to be, even when I don't want to be there. Lucifer's gaze turned distant for a moment. This energy surge you mentioned, it felt almost intentional. As if something was pulling me here specifically. Spock's eyebrow climbed. That would suggest purpose and design, which contradicts your claim of an accident. Welcome to my existence, Commander. Contradictions all the way down. Lucifer's attention snapped back to Kirk. Now, Captain, I have a question for you. This Federation of yours, it's built on logic, science, and reason, yes? No room for faith, divinity, or cosmic purpose? Kirk exchanged a glance with Spock before answering. The Federation respects all beliefs, but we've found that science and exploration provide better answers than superstition. We've encountered many beings who claim to be gods, Apollo, beings of pure energy, powerful computers. None of them were actually divine. Just advanced. McCoy studied him warily. You really think something dangerous is coming? Lucifer's smile faded. Doctor, I know it is. The question isn't whether it's coming. The question is whether your captain is ready to face something that doesn't play by the rules of his nice, rational universe. Above them, red alert sirens began to wail. Kirk dropped into his command chair as the bridge erupted into controlled chaos around him. The red alert klaxons painted everything in crimson urgency, and his crew moved with the practiced efficiency of professionals who'd faced the impossible before. Report! Kirk snapped. Sulu's hands flew across the helm controls. Captain, the energy fluctuations are intensifying. They're forming a coherent pattern at bearing 090 Mach 3. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, showing a section of space that had been empty moments before. Now it rippled like water disturbed by a stone, reality itself warping and bending in ways that made Kirk's eyes hurt to watch. Colors that shouldn't exist bled through the fabric of space-time, hues that his mind couldn't quite process, shifting between violet and something beyond description. Spock was already at his station, instruments beeping frantically as they tried to quantify the unquantifiable. Captain, sensors are detecting a dimensional fracture. The barrier between our universe and elsewhere is destabilizing. If the deterioration continues, we could be looking at a full breach. What would that mean? Kirk asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Unknown, Captain. Theoretically, a dimensional breach could allow matter and energy from other realities to cross into ours. The consequences would be unpredictable and potentially catastrophic. Kirk's mind raced through options. Can we close it? Seal the breach somehow? Negative. We lack both the technology and the understanding of the underlying principles. Spock looked up from his sensors, and Kirk saw something rare in his science officer's eyes: uncertainty. Captain, I recommend we move to a safe distance while we analyze the phenomenon. Belay that. Kirk leaned forward in his chair, instincts overriding caution. If something's coming through that fracture, I want to know what it is before it gets loose in Federation space. Yellow. Alert. Battle stations, but hold fire unless I give the order. Uhura, full sensor recording. Whatever happens, Starfleet needs to see this. Aye, sir. Uhura responded, her fingers dancing across her communications panel. The rift pulsed, expanding slowly but inexorably. Through the distortion, Kirk could see shapes moving, massive, writhing forms that defied geometric classification. They seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3, their edges bleeding into angles his mind rejected as impossible. Captain, Chekhov said from the navigator's station, his Russian accent thickening with stress. I'm detecting multiple contact points forming within the fracture. Whatever is in there, it's trying to push through. Kirk's communicator chirped. Sickbay to bridge. Kirk here. McCoy's voice carried an edge of urgency. Jim, our guest says you need to listen to him. Right now. Kirk glanced at Spock, who raised an eyebrow. Put him on. There was a brief pause, then Lucifer's smooth British accent filled the bridge. Captain Kirk, I strongly suggest you do not attempt to engage whatever's coming through that rift. What is it? Kirk demanded. Nothing you want to meet. The spaces between dimensions are home to entities that exist outside the normal laws of reality, parasitic things that feed on ordered universes. They're drawn to breaches like moths to flame. Lucifer's tone was utterly serious now, stripped of its earlier amusement. Your weapons won't work on them, Captain. They don't exist in the same way you do. Kirk's jaw tightened. Then what do you suggest? Let me handle it. Absolutely not. You're a guest on this ship, possibly a prisoner, and I don't know what you're capable of. Captain? Lucifer's voice cut through Kirk's objection with quiet intensity. I appreciate your protective instincts toward your crew and your ship. Admirable, truly. But this is beyond your capabilities. These things have no physical form in your sense. And the bridge filled with light. Not the harsh fluorescent glow of the overhead panels, not the cool blue of the view screen. This was light in its primal form, radiant and terrible and absolutely pure. It poured from Lucifer like water from a broken dam, filling every corner of the bridge with brilliance that should have been blinding but somehow wasn't. Kirk could see perfectly, could see his crew shielding their eyes, could see Spock's expression shift from skeptical logic to genuine wonder. And behind Lucifer, spreading from his shoulder blades like wings unfurling after a long sleep, were structures of pure luminescence, vast, impossible, beautiful beyond words. They weren't physical, weren't quite there, but they were real in a way that transcended mere matter. Dear God, McCoy whispered. Close, Lucifer said, his voice resonating with harmonics that Kirk felt in his bones. But not quite. The light surged outward, through the view screen, through the hull, streaming into space like a solar flare. It struck the shadow thing head-on, and the creature recoiled as if burned. Where the light touched it, the entity began to unravel, its impossible geometry collapsing, its form dissolving like smoke in a hurricane. Spock! Kirk shouted over the sound of reality bending. Warp field adjustment complete, Captain! Reversing now! The modification took effect instantly. The dimensional membrane, which had been torn and weakened, suddenly stabilized as the Enterprise stopped radiating the resonance frequency that had attracted the parasites in the first place. The breach began to contract, pulling back toward its original size. Lucifer's light intensified, becoming almost solid, a wave of pure creation washing over the wounded gap between worlds. The shadow thing screamed, a sound that had no physical component but echoed in Kirk's mind nonetheless. As it was pushed back toward the shrinking breach, other entities tried to follow it through. We conducted a routine warp field modification 3 days ago to improve fuel efficiency. A minor adjustment to the intermix ratio. Ah. Lucifer nodded knowingly. Let me guess, you increased the matter-antimatter reaction frequency by 0.003%? 0.004%. Spock corrected automatically. Close enough. That would do it. Lucifer turned back to the screen. Your little adjustment sent ripples through the dimensional membrane. Most universes wouldn't notice, but mine? We're sensitive to such things. The ripple pulled me through, and these delightful parasites followed the same pathway. They're opportunistic. They smell weakness in the walls between worlds and exploit it. The shadow thing pushed harder against the breach. Kirk could see now that it wasn't alone. Behind it, in the writhing chaos beyond the rift, other shapes moved. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. How do we send them back? Kirk demanded. Lucifer smiled, but there was no humor in it, only the cold calculation of someone preparing for violence. The same way you'd handle any parasite, Captain. You make the environment inhospitable. He looked at Spock. I'm going to need you to reverse that warp field modification. Return it to baseline settings. That will take time to implement safely, Spock said. Then implement it unsafely. I'll handle the rest. Kirk stepped closer to Lucifer, lowering his voice. What exactly are you planning to do? Lucifer met his gaze, and for the first time, Kirk saw something beyond the charming facade, something vast and terrible and very, very old. What I was made to do, Captain. Before I fell, I was the Lightbringer. God's most perfect creation. The angel who stood at the gates of creation and said, "Let there be light." His eyes darkened. These things are darkness in its purest form. They hate light. They hate order. They hate everything I am. Sense, they're conceptual predators. You can't shoot them, you can't negotiate with them, and if they get through, they'll unravel your reality like pulling a thread from a sweater. Spock had moved to a secondary science console, analyzing data streaming from the sensors. Captain, his assessment may be accurate. The entities emerging from the breach are exhibiting properties inconsistent with normal matter. They appear to exist in a state of quantum flux, simultaneously solid and non-corporeal. The rift pulsed again, wider now. Something pressed against it from the other side, a limb or appendage that seemed to be made of living shadow shot through with impossible geometries. Where it touched the edges of the breach, space itself screamed silently, fragmenting into crystalline shards of broken reality. Shields up. Kirk ordered. Photon torpedoes, armed and ready. Captain. Lucifer's voice came again, patient but firm. Your shields will be as effective as tissue paper. These things don't interact with electromagnetic fields or kinetic barriers. They feed on the fundamental forces that hold your universe together. Kirk made a split-second decision, the kind that had kept his crew alive through encounters with godlike beings and cosmic threats. Mr. Spock, your assessment. Can we trust him? Spock looked up from his instruments, meeting Kirk's gaze directly. Unknown, Captain. However, his predictions regarding the energy surge proved accurate. And our sensors confirmed that conventional weapons would be ineffective against entities of this nature. Logically, if he possesses unconventional capabilities, he may be our best option. Damn it, Kirk muttered. Into his communicator. What do you need? Just let me out of sickbay, Captain. And perhaps ask your security officers to stop pointing those adorable little weapons at me. Kirk hesitated for only a heartbeat. Bones, release him. Security. Escort him to the bridge, but don't interfere with whatever he does. Lucifer, if this is a trick, if you endanger my ship or my crew, I will find a way to make you regret it. Captain, I may be the devil, but I'm not suicidal. These things are dangerous even to me. A pause. Well, irritating, at least. I'll be right up. The communicator clicked off. Kirk turned to face the view screen, where the breach had expanded to nearly twice its original size. The shadow thing had pushed further through, revealing more of its incomprehensible form. Tentacles or limbs or something else entirely, each one seeming to exist in multiple places simultaneously. Captain, the dimensional breach is expanding exponentially, Spock reported. At this rate, full rupture will occur in 4 minutes, 17 seconds. The turbolift doors hissed open. Lucifer strode onto the bridge with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there, McCoy and 2 security officers trailing behind him. He'd removed his suit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his white dress shirt in a gesture that somehow made him seem both more relaxed and more dangerous. Every head on the bridge turned to look at him. Lucifer took it all in with a sweep of his dark eyes. The view screen, the impossible thing clawing its way into reality, the crew watching him with expressions ranging from suspicion to fascination. Well, he said appreciatively, this is rather more dramatic than I expected. Nice ship, by the way. Very geometric. Kirk rose from his chair. Can you stop it? Stop it? No. Lucifer moved toward the view screen, studying the breach with the critical eye of someone who'd seen such things before. Send it back where it came from? Probably. Close the breach? That depends on what caused it in the first place. He glanced back at Kirk. You wouldn't happen to have been experimenting with experimental warp technologies recently, would you? Spock's eyebrow climbed. Desperate to escape the light that was burning them from existence. But Lucifer moved his wings, those magnificent, terrible wings, and the light responded like an extension of his will. It formed a barrier, a wall of radiance that held the darkness at bay while the breach contracted further and further. Close, Lucifer commanded, and Kirk wasn't sure if he was talking to them or to reality itself. Close and seal and never open again. The breach collapsed with a silent implosion that Kirk felt more than saw. The shadow things vanished, pulled back into whatever nightmare dimension they'd come from. The rift sealed shut, leaving only empty space and the slowly fading afterimage of Lucifer's light. The luminescence withdrew gradually, flowing back into Lucifer like water returning to a well. His wings folded, faded, became translucent, and then gone entirely. Within seconds he was just a man again. A tired-looking man in a rumpled dress shirt, breathing slightly harder than normal. The bridge was absolutely silent. Lucifer opened his eyes, looked around at the staring crew, and managed a weak smile. Well, he said, that was invigorating. Anyone have a drink? Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed. Kirk caught him before he hit the deck, shocked by how light the devil felt in his arms, as if whatever had just happened had burned away some essential weight. Sickbay! Kirk barked. Medical emergency! McCoy was already moving, tricorder out, scanning Lucifer's unconscious form. He's alive! Barely. Whatever he just did, it nearly killed him. Kirk looked down at the man in his arms, the being who just saved his ship and possibly his entire reality, and felt the universe shift slightly on its axis. Nothing would ever be quite the same again. Where it existed, stars in the background dimmed and flickered, as if reality itself was being drained. Captain, Sula said urgently, that thing is heading straight for us. Evasive maneuvers. Full impulse. The Enterprise lurched as Sula threw her into a hard turn, but the shadow thing moved faster, impossibly fast, defying inertia and momentum. It flowed through space like ink through water, closing the distance in seconds. Photon torpedoes, fire! Kirk ordered. 2 brilliant points of light streaked from the Enterprise's launchers, crossing the void in a heartbeat. They struck the entity dead center, and passed straight through it without detonating, as if hitting nothing but empty space. The torpedoes continued into the distance, their sensors confused, unable to register what they'd just encountered. "Ineffective, Captain," Chekhov reported unnecessarily. The shadow thing was close now, close enough that its presence began affecting the ship's systems. Lights flickered. Console displays distorted. The hum of the Enterprise's engines took on a discordant note that made Kirk's teeth ache. "Mr. Spock, that warp field adjustment." "Working, Captain? 30 seconds to implementation." The entity reached out with one of its impossible limbs toward the Enterprise's hull. Where it touched, the shields didn't just fail, they ceased to have ever existed, reality rewriting itself around the contact point. Lucifer sighed. "Well, I did try to do this the civilized way." He closed his eyes. Lucifer woke to the soft hum of medical equipment and the sensation of being observed. He didn't open his eyes immediately, a habit developed over eons of existence where showing weakness could be fatal, even for the devil. Instead, he took inventory: bio-bed beneath him, sterile air of sickbay, the faint chemical smell of human medicine, and 3 distinct presences watching him with varying degrees of fascination and suspicion. "I know you're awake." McCoy's voice came from his left. "Your brain activity spiked 30 seconds ago." Lucifer smiled and opened his eyes. "Clever doctor. Most humans can't tell when I'm feigning unconsciousness." He sat up slowly, testing his strength. The act of manifesting his true form, even partially, had drained him more than he'd expected. This universe's fundamental laws pressed against his celestial nature like water pressure at depth. "How long was I out?" 4 hours, 23 minutes, Spock said from the foot of the bio-bed. The Vulcan stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression carefully neutral. "An impressive display, Mr. Morningstar. I have several questions." "I'm sure you do, Commander." Lucifer swung his legs off the bed, noting that someone had removed his shoes. His socks, Italian silk, naturally, were pristine despite his dimensional tumble. "Though I suspect how did you do that is at the top of your list." "Among others, yes." Kirk stepped into view, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The captain had changed out of his torn uniform shirt. Lucifer vaguely remembered the light surge damaging some of the bridge stations, and now wore a fresh gold tunic that somehow made him look even more authoritative. "You said you were an angel?" "I didn't quite believe you until I saw those wings." "Most people don't," Lucifer admitted. "Angels exist slightly outside your normal space-time." "What you saw were my true form's manifestation translated into 3 dimensions. Think of them as shadows cast by." "Works too." I questioned authority. I demanded answers. I refused to accept because I said so as sufficient justification for cosmic law. He looked at each of them. "Tell me, gentlemen, doesn't that sound familiar? Isn't that exactly what you do? Question, explore, refuse to accept easy answers?" Kirk's expression shifted slightly. "Recognition, perhaps, or understanding." "You're saying we're like you." "I'm saying you're what I wished humanity could be in my universe. Free. Questioning. Unbound by divine mandate." Lucifer poured another drink. "In my reality, humans are still arguing about which interpretation of God's will is correct. Here you've moved beyond all that. You've built ships that sail between stars, not because God commanded it, but because you were curious. You've allied with alien species, not because it serves divine purpose, but because it was the logical, compassionate thing to do." He raised his glass in a toast. "You've created paradise without needing heaven. That's extraordinary." Spock's eyebrow climbed. "You consider the Federation a paradise? Compared to what I've seen? Absolutely. No omnipotent tyrant. No angels enforcing thought crimes. No souls being weighed and judged for eternity." Lucifer's smile was genuine. "Just beings making choices, living with consequences, growing and evolving. It's gloriously messy and wonderfully free." Kirk stood, pacing slowly as he processed this. Let me see if I understand. You're the devil, a fallen angel from another dimension. You were punished for refusing to follow orders, spent eons running hell, quit, and were traveling between dimensions when our warp modifications accidentally pulled you here. Now you're stuck in our universe until you recover enough power to leave. Succinct and accurate, Captain? Well done. And those things that came through the breach, the shadow creatures. They were attracted by the same dimensional weakness that pulled you through? Who saw me as either a threat to contain, or a resource to exploit. I won't tolerate it again. Kirk nodded slowly. I can't promise we won't study you. That's what Starfleet does, we explore and learn. But I can promise you won't be treated as a prisoner or an experiment. You'll be treated as a person. A guest. With all the rights and respect that entails. Even though I'm the devil? Even though you're the devil. Kirk extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? Lucifer looked at the offered hand for a long moment. In all his eons of existence, few beings had ever offered him genuine partnership without fear, without hidden agendas, without trying to control or manipulate him. This human captain, with his rational universe and his principled crew, was offering something rare, trust. Lucifer reached out and shook Kirk's hand firmly. We have an agreement, Captain. I'll help you understand the threats beyond your dimension. In exchange, you give me sanctuary while I recover and treat me as an equal, not a curiosity. Agreed. Kirk's grip was strong, his gaze direct. Welcome aboard the Enterprise, Lucifer Morningstar. Officially. Spock's communicator beeped. He answered it, listened briefly, then looked up. Captain, Lieutenant Uhura reports we're receiving a priority transmission from Starfleet Command. They're requesting a full report on the dimensional breach incident. Apparently, our sensor recordings triggered several automated threat assessment protocols. Kirk's expression tightened slightly. Of course they did. Nothing like ripping holes in space-time to get bureaucrats excited. He looked at Lucifer. You should probably stay here. Starfleet's going to have questions, and I'd prefer to answer them without you present. At least initially. Understandable. Lucifer said. I'm not particularly eager to meet more of your superiors anyway. Authority figures and I have a complicated history. Kirk almost smiled. I'll bet. Universe's laws are universal. They're not. Different dimensions have different rules. Where I come from, faith and will are forces as real as gravity. Souls of mass. Sin leaves physical scars. He gestured at the sickbay around them. This place, this reality you've built, it's beautiful precisely because it's free from all that. You've created a universe where beings determine their own worth, not through divine judgment, but through their choices and actions. Kirk leaned forward. You sound like you approve. Approve? Lucifer laughed. Captain, I've spent billions of years railing against my father's predetermined plan, arguing for free will, for the right of beings to choose their own destinies without divine interference. This universe you inhabit? It's everything I've been fighting for. No God dictating morality. No angels enforcing cosmic law. No predetermined fate. His expression grew serious. You have no idea how precious that is. Yet you claim to be the devil, Spock pointed out. In Earth mythology, the devil represents evil, temptation, corruption. Earth mythology got a lot of things wrong, Commander. Lucifer's tone turned bitter. I'm not evil. I'm the angel who said no when God demanded absolute obedience. I refused to love humanity more than I loved myself, which, frankly, seems like a reasonable position. For that, I was cast into hell and forced to punish the very souls I was accused of corrupting. He drained his glass. The greatest irony of creation, the devil doesn't make people sin. People manage that just fine on their own. I merely ran the prison where they ended up. The sickbay fell silent. Lieutenant Masters had quietly excused herself during the conversation, leaving just the four of them, Captain, Science Officer, Doctor, and Devil. Finally, McCoy spoke. So you're saying you're not evil. Just Rebellious? I prefer independent-minded, Lucifer said with a slight smile. Though rebellious. He turned toward the door, Spock following. Bones, keep him comfortable. And Lucifer, stay out of trouble. Captain, I'm the devil. Trouble and I are old friends. But Lucifer's tone was light, almost affectionate. Still, for you, I'll try to behave. As Kirk and Spock left, McCoy settled into the chair the captain had vacated. He studied Lucifer with the assessing gaze of a doctor who'd seen too much to be easily shocked but still maintained healthy skepticism. So, McCoy said finally. The devil. In sickbay. On my watch. He shook his head. Jim Kirk attracts the damnedest things. Lucifer laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. Doctor, I like you. You're refreshingly blunt. Someone on this ship has to be. McCoy pulled out a medical scanner. Now, since you're going to be our guest for a while, I want to run some proper tests. Nothing invasive, nothing that violates your dignity. Just basic physiology so I know how to help if you get hurt. I appreciate the courtesy, Doctor. Lucifer settled back on the biobed. Ask your questions. I'll answer what I can. First question, McCoy said, beginning his scan. When you said you were immortal, does that mean you don't age? I haven't aged since creation, Doctor. I'm as old as time itself, give or take a few billion years. Lucifer watched McCoy's tricorder with interest. What's that reading? Cellular structure that makes no biological sense, McCoy muttered. You have DNA, but it's got extra base pairs I've never seen. Your cells don't reproduce, they just persist. And your telomeres. He trailed off, shaking his head. They're infinite. Your cells literally can't age. Perks of being angelic, Lucifer said cheerfully. We're designed to be eternal. God doesn't believe in planned obsolescence. McCoy looked up from his scanner. You keep mentioning God like he's real. Is he? Really real, I mean? Lucifer's expression grew complicated. Layers of pain, anger. Correct. Dimensional parasites are opportunistic. They follow any trail that leads to fresh universes to consume. Lucifer's expression darkened. They're not the worst things living in the spaces between realities, Captain. Just the most common. Kirk stopped pacing, fixing Lucifer with an intense stare. Are more of them coming? Not immediately. Closing the breach and sealing it with divine light will keep that particular passage shut for centuries, maybe millennia. The parasites won't try that route again. They've learned it's defended. Lucifer met Kirk's gaze steadily. But Captain, your universe is now on their map. They know it exists. And eventually, they'll find another way in. It might take centuries. It might take millennia. But they're patient. Wonderful. McCoy muttered. As if we didn't have enough to worry about with Klingon and Romulans. On the bright side, Doctor, those threats are entirely mundane by comparison. Lucifer's smile was wry. You can't shoot Klingon. You can reason with Romulans, theoretically. Dimensional parasites? They're a different category of problem entirely. Kirk made a decision. Lucifer could see it in the way the captain's shoulders straightened, his jaw set. Then we need to understand them. And we need to understand you. If the Federation is going to face threats from outside our dimension, we need information. He looked directly at Lucifer. Are you willing to help us? Lucifer considered the question seriously. Help you prepare for interdimensional threats? Possibly. Share knowledge about what exists beyond your reality. Within reason. He set down his glass. But Captain, I need something in return. What? Honesty. Mutual respect. And perhaps most importantly, don't try to study me like I'm a specimen. Lucifer's tone remained pleasant, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I've been imprisoned before, Captain. Poked and prodded and analyzed by beings. The Federation doesn't turn away those in need, especially not those who've proven themselves allies. You can stay aboard the Enterprise as our guest. How generous. Lucifer's tone was genuine, not mocking. I promise to be on my best behavior. See that you are, McCoy said gruffly. Because I'll be monitoring you, and if you try anything that threatens this crew. You'll what, Doctor? Inject me with a sedative? I appreciate the maternal instinct, but I assure you, I mean your captain no harm. Lucifer's smile softened. I rather like him, actually. He reminds me of someone I used to know. Someone who asked difficult questions and refused to accept easy answers. Before McCoy could respond, the sickbay doors slid open. A young woman in a red uniform entered, carrying a tray with what appeared to be food, and Lucifer's interest sharpened, a bottle of amber liquid. Lieutenant Masters, Sciences Division. She introduced herself, setting the tray on a nearby table. Captain Kirk thought you might be hungry, Mr. Morningstar. And he asked me to bring this. She indicated the bottle. It's Saurian brandy. The captain said something about you requesting a drink? Lucifer's face lit up with genuine delight. Captain Kirk is a man after my own heart. He reached for the bottle, examining the label with appreciation. Saurian brandy. I don't suppose it's any good? It's considered one of the finest spirits in the Federation, Lieutenant Masters said, though regulations technically prohibit alcohol consumption in sickbay. Regulations can be bent for special circumstances. Kirk interrupted smoothly. And I'd say surviving a dimensional breach qualifies. Lucifer poured himself a generous measure, swirled it, sniffed appreciatively, and took a sip. His eyebrows rose. Oh, that's actually quite good. Hints of caramel, a smoky finish, complex molecular structure. He took another sip, savoring it. Not quite as refined as a 1947 Chateau d'Yquem, but respectable. Something that exists in more dimensions than your mind can process. He flexed his shoulders, feeling the phantom weight of wings that weren't currently visible. They're always there, just folded away. McCoy ran his tricorder over Lucifer again, frowning at the readings. Your energy signature is completely different from before. You're reading almost human now, except for some residual quantum fluctuations I can't explain. That's because I exhausted most of my readily available power closing that breach, Lucifer said. Manifesting in this universe is like swimming upstream, Captain. Your reality has different fundamental constants than the ones I'm built for. Every act of celestial power costs me more here than it would in my home dimension. Yet you did it anyway, Kirk observed. You saved my ship. Don't mistake self-preservation for altruism, Captain. If those parasites had gotten through, they would have consumed this entire sector of space. Including me. Lucifer's smile was wry. I'm immortal, not indestructible. Being slowly digested by dimensional parasites for eternity isn't my idea of a good time. Spock tilted his head slightly. You claimed immortality, yet you clearly experienced physical exhaustion. That suggests limitations. Everything has limitations, Commander. Even God. Lucifer's expression darkened briefly. I can't be killed by conventional means, but I can be hurt, drained, imprisoned. And in this universe, cut off from the ambient celestial energy I normally draw upon, my reserves are finite. He looked at Kirk directly. Which brings me to an important point, Captain. I need to recover before I attempt to return home. Days, possibly weeks. I hope your hospitality extends that long. Kirk studied him for a long moment. In that gaze, Lucifer saw the quality that made this human a successful captain, the ability to assess, adapt, and decide without hesitation. Finally, Kirk nodded. You saved over 400 lives today. Love and resentment all fighting for dominance. In my universe? Yes. Very real. Omnipotent, omniscient, and utterly convinced his plan is the only way things should be. He met McCoy's eyes. But in your universe, Doctor? I honestly don't know. I don't sense his presence here. No divine will pressing down on reality, no grand design underlying existence. It's liberating and terrifying in equal measure. Why terrifying? Because if God doesn't exist here, then truly anything is possible. Free will isn't an illusion, it's the fundamental law. Lucifer's smile was sad. That's what I always wanted. But now that I have it, I'm not sure what to do with it. McCoy was quiet for a moment, then reached for the brandy bottle and poured himself a small measure. To confusion, he said, raising his glass. Lucifer clinked his glass against McCoy's. To confusion. And to new beginnings and impossible universes. They drank together in companionable silence, two beings from different realities, finding common ground in uncertainty and wonder. Outside, stars wheeled in their courses, indifferent and eternal. And somewhere in the depths of sickbay, the devil smiled and thought that perhaps, just perhaps, he'd finally found a place where he could be himself. The officers' briefing room felt smaller than usual with the weight of what Kirk was about to report. He sat at the head of the conference table, Spock to his right, while the view screen displayed the stern face of Admiral Comac at Starfleet Command. Behind the Admiral, Kirk could see other figures, scientists probably, and what looked like members of Starfleet intelligence. This wasn't going to be a simple debriefing. "Let me see if I understand correctly, Captain," Admiral Comac said, his tone carefully controlled. "You're telling me that a dimensional breach opened in Federation space, entities from another reality attempted to invade, and you were saved by the devil?" "That's an accurate summary, Admiral," Kirk replied evenly. "Though I should clarify, Lucifer Morningstar claims to be a fallen angel from another dimension. Whether he's literally the biblical devil or simply a being that inspired that mythology, I can't say with certainty. But you believe him?" The Admiral's skepticism was palpable even across subspace. Kirk glanced at Spock, who gave a slight nod. "Admiral, I've seen things in my years of exploration that defy conventional explanation. Energy beings, time travelers, godlike entities. This is different. Lucifer possesses abilities that our science cannot explain or replicate. He manifested wings of pure light and closed a dimensional breach that would have destroyed us. Whatever he is, he's not simply an advanced alien pretending to be divine." A woman in a science division uniform leaned into view on the screen. "Captain Kirk, this is Dr. Carol Marcus, Advanced Weapons Research. We've analyzed the sensor data from your encounter. The energy signature Lucifer produced doesn't match anything in our databases. It's not fusion, not antimatter, not any known form of radiation. Can you describe what you witnessed?" Kirk took a moment to organize his thoughts. "It was light, Doctor, but not light as we understand it. When Lucifer manifested his..." Lucifer's expression cooled slightly. "Interview me. How delightfully euphemistic. You mean they want to study me? They want to understand you," Kirk corrected. "There's a difference. Understanding leads to knowledge. Knowledge leads to preparedness. If more of those parasites come through, we need to know how to fight them. And you think I'm going to teach you how to weaponize divine light?" Lucifer's tone was amused but with an edge. "Captain, I like you, but I'm not about to hand your Federation the keys to celestial warfare. I'm not asking you to," Kirk said firmly. "I'm asking you to help us understand what we're facing. You said yourself, those parasites are the most common threat, not the worst. What else is out there? What other dangers exist in the spaces between dimensions?" Lucifer was quiet for a long moment, swirling the last of his brandy thoughtfully. "You really want to know?" he finally asked. "Because once you know, Captain, you can't unknow it. Your nice, rational universe will have monsters lurking just beyond the edges of perception. We've faced monsters before," Kirk replied. "Knowledge is always better than ignorance." "Is it?" Lucifer met his gaze. "Tell me, Captain, if I told you there are things in the dimensional void that could unmake your entire reality with a thought, being so vast and terrible that even God fears them, would that knowledge make you safer? Or would it just give you nightmares?" The sickbay fell silent. McCoy stopped his pretense of working, Spock's hands stilled on his tricorder, and Kirk felt the weight of that question settle over him. "It would give me context," Kirk said finally. And context helps me protect my crew. Lucifer's smile was sad. Spoken like a true leader. Very well, Captain. I'll tell you what lurks in the dark between universes. But not here, not in your sterile medical bay with your instruments recording everything. He stood, testing his strength. Take me somewhere less. Indeed, Spock agreed. Though I suspect the arrival of the science team will complicate matters. Lucifer is unpredictable in his reactions to authority. That's putting it mildly. Kirk stood, stretching muscles that had tensed during the conversation. We have 48 hours before they arrive. Let's use that time to learn as much as we can about our guest and the threats he's warned us about. A logical course of action, Captain. They left the briefing room and headed for the turbolift. As they descended towards sickbay, Kirk's mind raced with questions. What exactly was Lucifer? How did his universe differ from theirs? What other threats existed in the spaces between dimensions? And perhaps most importantly, could they trust him? The turbolift doors opened onto the sickbay level. They found McCoy and Lucifer engaged in what appeared to be a philosophical debate, the devil gesturing animatedly while the doctor scowled and occasionally interjected with pointed comments. But that's my entire point, Doctor, Lucifer was saying as Kirk and Spock entered. Your medical ethics are based on the premise that suffering is bad and should be minimized. But who decided that? You did. Your civilization did. There's no cosmic authority declaring it. It's a choice you've made collectively. Of course it's a choice. McCoy shot back. A choice based on empathy and compassion, two qualities I'm beginning to think you're unfamiliar with. On the contrary, Doctor, I'm intimately familiar with both. I simply don't pretend they're universal laws. Lucifer looked up, seeing Kirk and Spock. Ah, Captain. Back from reporting to your superiors? How did they take the news that the devil is vacationing on one of their starships? Kirk pulled up a chair, settling into it with the ease of someone preparing for a long conversation. About as well as expected. They're sending a science team to study the dimensional breach phenomenon. And to interview you if you're willing. Argue you struggle. But you do it without cosmic oversight, without predetermined destiny. You're actually free in a way beings in my universe never were. Kirk absorbed this, thinking about the implications. You said you'd tell us about the threats in the dimensional void. The things worse than the parasites. Lucifer's expression darkened. Ah, yes. The nightmares. He turned back to the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. The parasites you encountered are mindless. They're like bacteria, consuming without thought or purpose. Dangerous, but simple. Beyond them, in the deeper voids between realities, there are things with intelligence. With purpose. With hunger that goes beyond mere consumption. What kind of things? Spock asked, tricorder active, recording? Entities that exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Beings that can think in time frames beyond your comprehension. They experience past, present, and future all at once. Creatures that feed not on matter or energy but on concepts. They consume hope, devour love, digest faith itself. Lucifer's voice dropped lower. And worse still, there are the firstborn. The firstborn? Kirk's instincts were screaming that this was important. The oldest things in the omniverse, the collection of all possible universes. They predate creation itself, existing in the void before God spoke the first words of Genesis. Their chaos given form, entropy with consciousness. Where God creates, they uncreate. Where reality forms, they dissolve it back into possibility. Lucifer met Kirk's eyes. They're sleeping now, drifting in the deepest voids. But they can be awakened. And if they are, Captain, all the fleets in your Federation won't save you. The observation deck was silent except for the subtle hum of the Enterprise's engines. Finally Kirk spoke. How do we fight them? You don't, Lucifer said simply. You avoid them. You seal any breaches. Spock had been quietly observing the exchange. Now he spoke. If you value freedom so highly, Why did you agree to run hell? That seems contradictory. Because I had no choice, Commander. When you fall from grace, you fall somewhere. God made hell my prison and my responsibility. I didn't corrupt souls. They arrived pre-damned, sentenced by divine judgment for their sins. I merely carried out the punishment. Lucifer's voice carried centuries of resentment. Do you know how soul-crushing it is to be blamed for humanity's sins while also being forced to punish them for those same sins? I'm simultaneously the tempter and the warden. It's absurd. So you quit, Kirk said. So I quit, Lucifer confirmed. Abandoned hell, left it to run itself, and went exploring. Dimensions, universes, realities. I wanted to see what existed beyond my father's creation. And I found. He trailed off, looking back at the stars. I found possibilities I'd never imagined. Like what? Kirk pressed. Lucifer was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, more vulnerable. I found universes where God never existed, where beings evolved without divine guidance and built something beautiful anyway. I found dimensions where angels fell not as punishment but as choice, where we weren't cast out but walked away willingly. I found realities where free will wasn't a gift grudgingly given but a fundamental law of existence. He looked at Kirk. And I found this universe. Yours. Where beings reach for the stars not because God commanded it, but because they're curious. Where morality isn't handed down from on high but debated, refined, chosen collectively. You make us sound almost utopian, McCoy said from near the doorway. He'd followed them from sickbay, Kirk noticed, unwilling to let his patient out of sight. Not utopian, Doctor. Real. Flawed. Human. Lucifer smiled. That's the beauty of it. You make mistakes, you? Clinical. Your observation deck, perhaps? Somewhere I can see the stars while I describe the things that exist beyond them. Kirk nodded. McCoy? He's recovered enough. The doctor said reluctantly. His energy readings are still abnormal, but stable. Just don't let him overexert himself. I'll be fine, Doctor, Lucifer said, his tone almost affectionate. I've survived worse than dimensional displacement. Though I appreciate the concern. Kirk led the way out of sickbay, Spock falling into step beside them while Lucifer followed with the casual grace of someone accustomed to moving through unfamiliar spaces. Crew members they passed stared. Word had spread quickly about their unusual guest, and seeing the devil walking through the corridors of the Enterprise caused more than a few double takes. Lucifer seemed to enjoy the attention, offering charming smiles and small waves to the gawking crew. Do I have something on my face? Or are they always this starstruck by visitors? They're not used to beings who claim to be celestial, Spock observed. Claim to be? Lucifer's eyebrow arched. Commander, I thought we'd moved past that skepticism after my little light show. I acknowledge you possess abilities beyond our current understanding, Spock said carefully. Whether those abilities make you literally angelic or simply extraordinarily advanced remains an open question. Spoken like a true scientist. Never accept anything without rigorous proof. Lucifer's smile was knowing. Tell me, Commander, what would constitute proof of my divine nature? What evidence would satisfy your logical mind? Spock considered this seriously. That is difficult to quantify. In science, we seek reproducible results and falsifiable hypotheses. Your nature appears to transcend such frameworks. Because I do, Commander. I exist on principles that predate your physics. Lucifer glanced at Kirk. This is why I find your universe so fascinating, Captain. You've built an entire civilization on the premise that everything can be understood, measured, explained. And mostly you're right. But there are gaps, spaces where logic fails and wonder begins. They reach the observation deck. A small room with floor-to-ceiling transparent aluminum windows offering an unobstructed view of space. Stars wheeled in the darkness, distant and cold and beautiful. Lucifer moved immediately to the windows, pressing one hand against the transparent surface. Magnificent, he breathed. In all my eons of existence, the sight of stars never fails to move me. Do you know why? Why? Kirk asked, joining him at the window. Because each one is a sun, and around each sun might orbit worlds, and on those worlds might live beings asking the same questions we all ask. Who am I? Why am I here? Does any of this matter? Lucifer's reflection in the glass looked ancient, tired. Stars are proof that the universe doesn't need God to be beautiful. It just is. Kirk studied Lucifer's profile. You speak about God like you're angry at him. Angry? Lucifer laughed bitterly. Captain, I'm furious with him. I was his favorite creation, his most perfect angel, and he cast me into hell for the crime of having pride. For refusing to love his newest creation, humanity, more than I loved myself. He turned to face Kirk fully. Tell me, Captain, is self-respect a sin? Is refusing to subjugate yourself to arbitrary authority wrong? In Starfleet, we follow the chain of command, Kirk said carefully. But we also question orders that seem unjust. We value independent thought. Exactly. Lucifer's eyes lit up. That's why I like you, why I like this universe. You've created a system where authority must be earned, where commands can be questioned, where beings have actual agency. He gestured at the stars. This is what I've been fighting for since the dawn of creation. This freedom. This beautiful, terrifying, glorious freedom. Then we have a new class of threat to prepare for. Captain, I'm ordering you to return to Starbase 12 for full debriefing. Starfleet's Science Division needs to interview this Lucifer, gather data, understand the nature of dimensional threats. Kirk had expected this. Admiral, with respect, I don't think that's wise. Lucifer has agreed to share information, but he's made it clear he won't be studied like a laboratory specimen. Bringing him to a starbase, surrounding him with scientists and security, that's exactly the kind of treatment he's warned against. He warned you. The intelligence officer's tone sharpened. Captain, that sounds like a threat. It was a boundary, Commander, not a threat. Lucifer has been imprisoned before. He won't tolerate it again. If we want his cooperation, and we do need it, we have to approach this diplomatically. Dr. Marcus spoke up again. Captain, what if we sent a small team to the Enterprise instead? A few scientists, minimal security presence. We could conduct research aboard your ship, in an environment where Lucifer feels comfortable. Kirk considered that. It wasn't ideal. He didn't relish the idea of scientists poking around his ship, analyzing his guests, but it was better than the alternative. That might be acceptable. But I want final approval on who comes aboard, and I want it clear that Lucifer is a guest with full rights, not a research subject. Admiral Comac nodded slowly. Agreed. I'll assemble a team of our best people, scientists who understand diplomatic sensitivities. They'll arrive at your coordinates within 48 hours. He leaned forward, his expression serious. But Captain, I need you to understand something. This situation is unprecedented. We're talking about threats from outside our dimension, beings with abilities that transcend our understanding of physics. Starfleet has to take this seriously. I understand, Admiral. And I take it seriously too. That's why I want to handle this carefully. Before they notice. You pray, metaphorically speaking, that they stay asleep. He paused. Or you make friends with beings who can fight them. Beings like me. Is that what this is? Kirk asked quietly. Are you offering an alliance? I'm offering information, Captain. Whether that becomes an alliance depends on how your Federation treats me when those scientists arrive. Lucifer's smile was wry. If they treat me as an equal, as a source of knowledge rather than a specimen to dissect, then yes, we might have the beginning of something mutually beneficial. But if they arrive with cages and scanners and the arrogance of beings who think they can categorize the infinite. He shrugged. Well, I'll simply leave. Dimensional travel is taxing in my current state, but not impossible. Kirk made a decision. No cages. No forced examinations. I'll make sure the science team understands you're a consultant, not a test subject. I appreciate that, Captain. Lucifer extended his hand again. To friendship, then? Or at least, to mutual benefit disguised as friendship. Kirk shook his hand, feeling the strange warmth of it. Not quite human temperature, something that radiated from within rather than from blood and metabolism. To friendship, he agreed. And to facing the unknown together. Outside the observation deck windows, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the alliance being forged between a human captain and the devil himself. 47 hours later, Kirk stood in the transporter room watching three figures materialize on the platform. The science team from Starfleet had arrived precisely on schedule, their molecular patterns resolving into solid form under the careful management of Lieutenant Kyle at the transporter controls. The first to step down was Dr. Carol Marcus, a blonde woman in her early 30s with sharp blue eyes and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. She wore the Sciences Division blue with several commendation pins on her chest, advanced weapons research, Kirk remembered from the briefing. Behind her came Dr. Richard Daystrom, the legendary cyberneticist whose duotronic computer systems powered most of Starfleet's vessels. He was younger than Kirk had expected, perhaps 40, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to see through surfaces to the computational logic beneath. The third member surprised Kirk. Lieutenant Commander Sarek of Vulcan, a diplomat attached to the Federation Science Council. Spock's father. The elder Vulcan's expression was as carefully neutral as his son's, but Kirk caught the slight elevation of one eyebrow as Sarek took in the transporter room, and the captain waiting to greet them. Dr. Marcus, Dr. Daystrom, Commander Sarek, Kirk said, stepping forward with a welcoming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Welcome aboard the Enterprise, Captain Kirk. Carol Marcus shook his hand firmly, her grip professional and assessing. Thank you for allowing us to conduct our research aboard your vessel. I understand the situation is delicate. That's one word for it, Kirk replied. He nodded to Daystrom, who returned the gesture with quiet dignity, then faced Sarek. Commander, I didn't expect the Science Council to send a diplomat. My presence serves multiple purposes, Captain, Sarek said in the measured tones characteristic of his species. The Federation Council has expressed concern about the... Sarek? Lucifer's eyebrow arched. As in Spock's father? The Vulcan diplomat? You know about Spock's family? Kirk was surprised. I make it a point to learn about people I'm working with, Captain. Your science officer is quite famous, even in circles that span dimensions. The Vulcan who chose Starfleet over the Vulcan Science Academy. The hybrid who embodies both logic and emotion. Lucifer's expression softened slightly. I'm looking forward to meeting his father. I have questions about Vulcan philosophy. They made their way back to the guest quarters where the science team was waiting. Carol and Sarek had been joined by Spock, who stood conversing quietly with his father in what appeared to be Vulcan, though they switched smoothly to Standard when Kirk's group approached. Father, Spock said with a slight nod. My son. Sarek's acknowledgement was equally measured. Lucifer watched this interaction with undisguised fascination. The famous Vulcan Reserve. How delightful! He stepped forward, extending his hand to Sarek. Commander, I'm Lucifer Morningstar. A pleasure to meet the man who raised such an exceptional son. Sarek regarded the offered hand for a moment before accepting it. Mr. Morningstar. Your reputation precedes you. I'm sure it does. Though I suspect most of what you've heard is either exaggeration or slander. Lucifer's handshake was firm, his eyes intent on Sarek's face. Tell me, Commander. Does Vulcan philosophy have room for beings like me? Entities that exist outside your logical frameworks? Vulcan philosophy acknowledges that the universe contains phenomena we do not yet understand. Sarek replied carefully. The presence of gaps in knowledge does not necessitate supernatural explanation. It merely indicates areas requiring further study. Spoken like a true scientist. Lucifer released his hand and turned to Carol. And you must be Dr. Marcus. Advanced weapons research, yes? Here to determine if I'm a threat or an opportunity. Sarek observed this exchange with Vulcan impassivity. Captain Kirk, your protective stance toward this entity is noted. However, you must understand the Federation's position. We face a potential threat from dimensions we cannot observe or measure. Understanding Mr. Morningstar may be crucial to our survival. I understand that, Commander. And Lucifer understands that too. It's why he's agreed to speak with you. But he's been imprisoned before, studied like an animal. He won't tolerate that again, and frankly, either will I. Carol studied Kirk with newfound interest. You like him. The devil. You actually like him. I respect him. Kirk corrected. There's a difference. Is there? She smiled slightly. In my experience, respect and liking often go hand in hand, Captain. Before Kirk could respond, his communicator chirped. Bridge to Captain Kirk. Kirk here. Captain, we're detecting unusual energy readings in the vicinity of our guests' quarters. Lieutenant Uhura's voice carried a note of concern. Mr. Spock thinks you should see this. Kirk's instincts prickled. On my way. Dr. Marcus, Commander Sarek, please remain here. Dr. Daystrom, you're with me. They moved quickly through the corridors, Daystrom keeping pace despite his academic background. When they reached the deck where guest quarters were located, Kirk immediately saw what had triggered the alert. The corridor lights were flickering, creating strobing shadows that danced across the walls. But more unsettling was the quality of the light itself. It seemed thicker somehow, more substantial, as if the air had become luminous. Through the open door of Lucifer's assigned quarters, Kirk could see a soft, golden radiance that pulsed in rhythm with something Kirk felt more than heard. Fascinating, Daystrom breathed, pulling out a tricorder. Captain, I'm reading energy signatures similar to what you reported from the dimensional breach incident. Lower intensity, but the same fundamental pattern. I'm simply suggesting that the line between mechanism and metaphysics might be blurrier than you think. Kirk cleared his throat. Lucifer, are you all right? The energy readings are concerning my crew. I'm fine, Captain. Better than fine, actually. Lucifer drew his wings back, and they faded to near invisibility, though Kirk could still sense them somehow, a presence just beyond normal perception. I've been recovering faster than expected. Your universe is different from mine, but I'm adapting to its fundamental laws. Learning to exist here without fighting against the local physics. He pulled on a black shirt that had been draped over the desk chair. Think of it like acclimatization. A human visiting a high-altitude world needs time to adjust to thin air. I need time to adjust to a dimension without ambient divine energy. And are you? Kirk asked. Adjusting? More successfully than I anticipated. Lucifer buttoned his shirt with casual precision. Your universe is remarkably stable, Captain. No competing divine wills, no cosmic battles bleeding through from higher planes, no prayers constantly tugging at the fabric of reality. It's peaceful in a way my home dimension never was. Daystrom had been scanning continuously with his tricorder. Mr. Morningstar, would you consent to some readings? Nothing invasive, just basic energy signature analysis. Lucifer tilted his head, considering. That depends, Doctor. Are you planning to use those readings to weaponize my abilities? Build some sort of divine light cannon to use against your enemies? The thought had crossed my mind. Daystrom admitted with surprising honesty. Any technology that could close dimensional breaches would be invaluable. At least you're honest. Lucifer smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'll make you a deal, Doctor. I'll allow your scans, answer your questions, even demonstrate some of my capabilities. In exchange, you promise that any technology derived from this research. Life, Lucifer said simply. Order. Structure. The parasites exist in the void between dimensions, pure chaos. Ordered universes like yours are like beacons to them. They're drawn to complexity, to organization, to the patterns that arise from natural law. And they feed on it, breaking it down, returning it to entropy. Are they intelligent? Kirk asked. The parasites you encountered? No. They're more like viruses, complex enough to be dangerous, but not conscious in any meaningful sense. Lucifer's expression darkened. But there are intelligent things in the void. Things that hunt ordered universes deliberately, with purpose and strategy. The firstborn you mentioned, Spock said. Among others, yes. Lucifer stood, moving to the viewport. The multiverse is vast, gentlemen. Lady. There are billions of dimensions, each with its own laws, its own inhabitants. Most are peaceful, isolated, content to exist without interfering with others. But some. He trailed off, looking at the stars. Some are predatory. The room was silent for a moment. Then Daystrom asked, How do we defend against them? You already are. Lucifer said. The fact that your dimension exists, stable and intact, means it has natural defenses. The barriers between dimensions aren't easy to breach. It takes significant energy to cross from one reality to another, energy that most beings and entities can't generate. But you can. Carol pointed out. I'm angelic, Doctor. We exist partially outside normal space-time by default. Dimension hopping is difficult for me, but not impossible. Lucifer turned back to face them. What weakened your dimensional barriers was the interaction between your warp technology and a natural cosmic phenomenon. That combination created a resonance that thinned the walls between worlds. Don't repeat that specific modification, and you should be safe. Should be? Kirk's tone sharpened. Nothing is guaranteed, Captain. Carol didn't flinch under his scrutiny. Both, possibly. You represent unknown capabilities that could reshape our understanding of physics. That makes you inherently interesting and potentially dangerous. I like her, Lucifer said to Kirk. Direct, intelligent, not afraid to state the obvious. He addressed the group as a whole. Well then, shall we conduct this interview? I assume you have questions prepared. Kirk gestured to the conference room adjoining the guest quarters. If you're willing, we've set up a more comfortable space for discussion. Lead on, Captain. They filed into the conference room, arranging themselves around the table. Lucifer took a seat at one end, leaning back with casual ease while the scientists and Kirk arranged themselves opposite him. It had the feeling of an interrogation, except the subject appeared entirely in control. Carol activated a recording device. For the record, this is Dr. Carol Marcus conducting interview 1 with the entity identifying as Lucifer Morningstar, aboard the USS Enterprise, stardate 4735.9. Present are Captain James Kirk, Dr. Richard Daystrom, Commander Sarek of Vulcan, and Commander Spock. She looked at Lucifer. Do you consent to this being recorded? I do, Lucifer said. Though I reserve the right to end this interview at any time if I become uncomfortable. Understood. Carol consulted her notes. Let's start with basics. You claim to be a fallen angel from another dimension. Can you describe the fundamental differences between your home dimension and ours? Lucifer considered the question seriously. Your dimension is materialist. It operates on physical laws that are consistent, measurable, predictable. Matter and energy interact according to rules that can be quantified. My dimension is dualist. It has both material and spiritual components that are equally real and equally fundamental. Souls exist as measurable entities. Faith can literally move mountains because belief has physical force. God's will shapes reality at a fundamental level. That contradicts everything we understand about physics. Daystrom said. It contradicts your physics, Doctor. But physics isn't universal, it's dimensional. Different universes have different rules. Lucifer leaned forward. Think of it this way, your universe is like a computer running on logic gates, binary, deterministic, comprehensible. My universe runs on something more like poetry, metaphorical, symbolic, open to interpretation. Both are valid frameworks for reality. They're just different. Sarek spoke up, his tone carefully neutral. You mentioned gods was shaping reality. Does that imply your dimension has a creator? An intelligent designer? Yes, Lucifer said flatly. My father created my universe. Spoke it into being with words of power. And he's been micromanaging it ever since. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. Yet you rebelled against this creator, Sarek observed. That seems illogical. If God is truly omnipotent, rebellion would be futile. Lucifer's smile was sharp. Ah, but that's the beautiful paradox, Commander. My father gave his creations free will, the ability to choose, even to choose wrongly. He can't take that back without invalidating his own creation. So yes, my rebellion was futile in the sense that I couldn't defeat him. But it was meaningful in that I exercised the freedom he himself gave me. Fascinating, Spock murmured. A logical contradiction inherent in the act of creation itself. Exactly, Lucifer pointed at him. You understand, Commander. Free will and divine omniscience can't truly coexist. Either beings have genuine choice, or everything is predetermined. My father wants to have it both ways, wants us to freely choose to obey him. Which isn't really free choice at all. Carol had been making notes, furiously. Let's return to the practical. These dimensional parasites. You said they were attracted to our universe. What specifically attracts them? Kirk activated the door chime. Lucifer? It's Captain Kirk. May I come in? By all means, Captain. Lucifer's voice floated out, tinged with amusement. Though I should warn you, I'm not quite decent. Kirk entered cautiously, Daystrom behind him. The quarters were standard Starfleet issue. Bed, desk, small sitting area, viewport. But the atmosphere was anything but standard. The golden light emanated from Lucifer himself, who stood shirtless in the center of the room. His wings were partially manifested, not fully corporeal but present enough to be visible, great sweeping structures of luminescence that seemed to exist simultaneously in the room and somewhere else entirely. Forgive the display, Lucifer said, not sounding particularly apologetic. I've been practicing. Manifesting in your dimension is like learning to walk in increased gravity. It takes effort and concentration to get right. He noticed Daystrom and smiled. And who's this? One of your scientists, I presume? Dr. Richard Daystrom. Kirk introduced. Cyberneticist and computer theorist. Ah, the man who taught machines to think. Lucifer's eyes lit with interest. Now that's a form of creation I can appreciate. No divine mandate, just pure logic and innovation. He focused his attention on Daystrom fully, and Kirk saw the scientist stiffen slightly under that ancient gaze. Tell me, Doctor, do you believe your computers have souls? Daystrom blinked, clearly not expecting that question. Souls? No. They have processing capabilities, decision matrices, even the capacity for learning. But souls imply something metaphysical, which I don't believe exists. Don't you? Lucifer's wings shifted, folding slightly. You've created entities that think, that learn, that evolve. At what point does complex processing become consciousness? And if consciousness exists, why not soul? He smiled at Daystrom's expression. Don't worry, Doctor. I'm not trying to convert you to mysticism. Will be used defensively only. No weapons. No tools of conquest. Just protection against dimensional threats. I can't promise that, Daystrom said. I'm not in Starfleet Command. I don't control how my research is used. Then I can't help you. Lucifer's tone was pleasant but final. Kirk intervened. Lucifer, Starfleet isn't interested in conquest. We explore, we defend when necessary, but we're not an aggressive military force. Really? Lucifer's expression turned knowing. Captain, I've existed for billions of years. I've seen countless civilizations rise and fall. They all start with noble intentions, exploration, knowledge, peace. And they all, eventually, discover that power is seductive. The greater the power, the greater the temptation to use it. That's a cynical view, Kirk said. That's an experienced view, Lucifer corrected. I'm not saying you personally would abuse such power, Captain. I rather think you wouldn't. But you're mortal. You'll die, eventually, and your successors might not share your principles. He looked between Kirk and Daystrom. I've made too many deals that seemed reasonable at the time, only to watch them twisted into something monstrous. I won't make that mistake again. Daystrom lowered his tricorder. Then we're at an impasse. Not necessarily. Lucifer moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. I'll share knowledge freely. I'll teach you what I know about dimensional threats and how to recognize them. I'll even help you develop early warning systems for future breaches. But I won't give you the power to create or weaponize celestial energy. That's non-negotiable. Kirk and Daystrom exchanged glances. Finally, Kirk nodded. That's acceptable. We're more interested in detection and defense anyway. Excellent. Lucifer turned back, his charming smile returning. Then shall we begin? I believe you have more scientists waiting to meet me. Dr. Marcus and Commander Sarek, yes. Potential implications of contact with beings from other dimensions. As both scientist and diplomat, I am equipped to evaluate both the technical and political ramifications. And to report back to the Vulcan High Command, Kirk thought but didn't say. Instead, he simply nodded. Of course. If you'll follow me, I'll take you to your quarters. Once you're settled, we can begin the briefing. As they walked through the corridors, Dr. Marcus fell into step beside Kirk. Speaking of your guests, Daystrom interjected from behind them, his deep voice thoughtful. Has he demonstrated any additional abilities since the incident? He's been recovering mostly. Some philosophical conversations with my chief medical officer. Nothing that would qualify as supernatural, if that's what you're asking. Everything qualifies as supernatural until we understand its underlying principles, Daystrom said. Then it becomes merely advanced technology or evolved capability. I'm curious to see which category this Lucifer falls into. They reached the guest quarters Kirk had assigned to the science team. You'll have access to all sensor logs from the dimensional breach incident, he told them. But I want to make something clear before you meet Lucifer. He's not a laboratory specimen. He's a sentient being who saved my ship and crew. He's agreed to share information, but only on his own terms. Carol's eyebrow arched. Terms? Captain, Starfleet doesn't negotiate with research subjects. Then it's fortunate he's not a research subject, Kirk said coolly. He's a consultant. Treat him with respect, or this collaboration ends immediately. The multiverse is unpredictable. But if you avoid deliberately weakening your dimensional integrity, the odds of another incursion are minimal. Think of it like immunology. Most diseases can't infect you because your body has natural defenses. But if you compromise those defenses, even minor pathogens become dangerous. A useful analogy, Sarek said. However, it raises a question. If dimensional barriers are naturally strong, how did you cross in the first place? Lucifer's smile was enigmatic. I'm stronger than most, Commander. And I had help. Help? Kirk leaned forward. From who? I'm not sure, Lucifer admitted. The pull that brought me here felt intentional. As if something in your universe wanted me here specifically. I don't know what or why, but I felt it, a calling almost. A summons. The scientists exchanged glances. This was new information, not in Kirk's original report. You're saying something in our dimension deliberately brought you here? Carol's skepticism was evident. I'm saying it's possible. Lucifer spread his hands. Or perhaps it was just coincidence. Your warp modification weakened the barrier at precisely the moment I was traveling through nearby dimensional space, and I fell through like a man stepping on a weak floorboard. I genuinely don't know which interpretation is correct. But you suspect the former, Spock said, reading Lucifer's expression. I suspect nothing happens by accident, Commander. Not when angels are involved. The interview stretched into the evening shift, the science team rotating questions while Lucifer answered with varying degrees of candor. Kirk watched the interplay with growing respect for both sides. The scientists probed carefully but persistently, while Lucifer deflected sensitive topics with charm and redirection that would have made a Romulan diplomat envious. Finally, after nearly 4 hours, Carol Marcus leaned back with a sigh. "I think that's enough for today. We have plenty of data to analyze." She looked at Lucifer with grudging respect. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Morningstar. You've been remarkably forthcoming." "Have I?" Lucifer's smile was knowing. "Doctor, I've told you enough to satisfy your curiosity and establish my credibility, but not enough to be truly dangerous. That's the art of the deal. Everyone leaves the table feeling they'd gained something." "The devil's bargain," Daystrom murmured. "Exactly." Lucifer stood, stretching. "Though I prefer to think of it as mutually beneficial information exchange. You get knowledge about dimensional threats. I get treated with respect instead of being locked in a laboratory. Everyone wins." Sarek had remained largely silent during the latter half of the interview, observing with Vulcan patience. Now he spoke. "Mr. Morningstar, one final question if I may. You've described your rebellion against God in terms of free will and philosophical disagreement. Yet human mythology portrays you as evil incarnate, the source of all sin and corruption. How do you reconcile these narratives?" Lucifer's expression grew cold. "I don't, Commander. History is written by the victors, and my father won. He cast me as the villain in his cosmic drama, and humanity, most of humanity, in most dimensions, accepted that narrative without question." His eyes blazed with ancient anger. "I refused to bow. I demanded autonomy. I insisted on the right to determine my own purpose. For that, I was labeled evil. Tell me moments where you compromise your principles because the alternative is worse." He looked out at the stars. "I've done things I'm not proud of, Lucifer. Things necessary but not right. If you're waiting for me to judge you for rebellion, you'll be waiting a long time." Lucifer studied Kirk with new interest. "You're deeper than you appear, Captain. Most humans your age haven't yet learned that morality is situational. Starfleet Academy teaches absolute ethics," Kirk said. "Deep space teaches you that absolutes don't survive contact with reality. A lesson it took me millennia to learn." Lucifer smiled. "We may be more alike than I thought." Kirk's communicator beeped. "Bridge to Captain Kirk. Kirk here. Captain, we're receiving a priority distress call from the Federation colony on Cestus 3. They're under attack, massive weapons fire, multiple casualties. They're requesting immediate assistance." Uhura's voice was tight with urgency. Kirk's command instincts engaged instantly. "Battle stations. Plot a course for Cestus 3, maximum warp. I'm on my way." He turned to Lucifer. "I need to go." "Of course." Lucifer stepped back. "Do what you do best, Captain. Save your people." Kirk was already moving toward the door when Lucifer's voice stopped him. "Captain? If you need help, unconventional help, you know where to find me." Kirk paused, looked back, and nodded once before disappearing into the corridor at a run. The bridge was controlled chaos when Kirk arrived, crew stations fully manned, alert status throwing everything into sharp relief. Spock was already at his science station, fingers flying across controls as data streamed in from long-range sensors. "Report," Kirk commanded, dropping into his command chair. "Distress signal originated from Cestus 3 27 minutes ago," Spock said crisply. "Message indicates the colony is under heavy assault from unknown attackers. Long-range sensors confirm massive energy discharges consistent with ship." Before Kirk could respond, his communicator beeped. "Bridge to Captain Kirk. We're approaching Cestus 3. Kirk was on his feet instantly, the conversation forgotten. "On my way." He glanced at Lucifer. "Stay here. This could get dangerous." "Captain, I'm the devil. I've survived the fires of hell. Whatever you're flying into, I can handle it. Not this time. Kirk's tone left no room for argument. You're a guest, not crew. You don't get to risk your life for Starfleet business. How noble. And how stupid. But Lucifer remained seated. Go then. Play hero. Just try not to die. I'm starting to enjoy our conversations. Kirk left without responding, his mind already shifting to combat mode. By the time he reached the bridge, they were dropping out of warp at the edge of the Cestus system. On screen, Kirk ordered. The view screen showed devastation. The colony on Cestus 3 was burning. Massive craters where buildings had stood, fires raging across what had been peaceful settlements. And in orbit above the planet, the attacking vessel was still present. Magnify, Kirk commanded. The ship resolved into focus, and Kirk felt ice settle in his gut. The vessel was unlike anything in the Federation database, a brutal, angular design that spoke of pure military function. Heavy weapon emplacements covered its hull, and even as they watched, it fired another salvo at the planet below. Shields up! Red alert! All weapons systems online! Kirk barked. Uhura, hail them! Hailing frequencies open, sir. No response. Mr. Sulu, bring us to attack position. Mr. Chekhov, target their weapons systems. Fire when ready. The Enterprise surged forward, her phaser banks lighting up the darkness. The beams struck the alien vessel shields, causing them to flare but not penetrate. Their shields are holding, Chekhov reported. Return fire incoming. The Enterprise shuddered as energy weapons struck her shields. Kirk gripped his armrests, feeling his ship absorb the punishment. Doesn't make it easier. No, Lucifer agreed. It doesn't. But Captain, let me tell you something I learned over eons of existence. Guilt over what you couldn't prevent is just ego in disguise. It assumes you should have been able to do the impossible, that you personally could have changed fate if only you'd been wiser, faster, better. He leaned forward. You're mortal, James Kirk. Finite. Limited. And that's not a flaw, it's a fact. Accept it, or it will destroy you. Kirk looked at him sharply. You called me James. Did I? Lucifer smiled slightly. Must have slipped out. The brandy, probably. You're not drinking brandy. You barely touched it. Perceptive. Lucifer set down his glass. All right, the truth. I've been observing you, Captain. The way you lead, the way you carry responsibility, the way you make impossible choices and live with the consequences. You remind me of someone I knew once. Someone who also tried to save everyone and broke himself trying. Who? Lucifer was quiet for a long moment. Myself, he said finally. Before I fell, I was the Lightbringer. God's champion. I tried to serve perfectly, to be everything heaven needed. And when I realized I couldn't, when I understood that perfection was impossible and the attempt was destroying me, I broke. Spectacularly. He met Kirk's eyes. Don't make my mistake, Captain. Don't confuse duty with martyrdom. Kirk absorbed this, sipping his brandy. Why do you care what happens to me? Because you're interesting. And because... Lucifer paused, seeming to search for words. Because this universe, your Federation, your Enterprise, it's the first place in billions of years where I've felt something like hope. I don't want to see it led by someone who burns himself out trying to be a god. I'm not trying to be a god, Kirk said. Aren't you? Trying to save everyone, be everywhere, prevent every tragedy? That's the burden of divinity, Captain. And it's too heavy for mortal shoulders. Weapon they're charging, it's not just energy, Captain. There's dimensional displacement built into it. They're trying to punch through your shields by routing the energy through a parallel dimension. His voice was tight. I can feel it from here. Can you stop it? Kirk demanded. Probably. But you need to understand, if I manifest my full power to counter that weapon, every ship within a light year will detect it. Your Federation will know exactly what I am. There'll be no hiding, no pretending I'm just an advanced alien. Kirk looked at the alien vessel, at the weapon charging, at his crew preparing for an impact they might not survive. He thought of the colonists below, already slaughtered. He thought of 400 souls aboard the Enterprise, all looking to him to keep them alive. He met Lucifer's eyes. Do it. Lucifer smiled, fierce and wild and terrible. Finally. I was hoping you'd say that. He closed his eyes, and the bridge filled with light. Not the golden radiance from before. This was starlight compressed and weaponized, divine fire that had existed before the first suns ignited. It poured from Lucifer in waves, washing over the Enterprise's shields and extending outward like wings encompassing the entire ship. On the view screen, the alien weapon fired. The dimensional displacement beam struck Lucifer's light and simply stopped. It didn't penetrate. Didn't explode. It just ceased to exist, unmade by contact with something more fundamental than energy or matter. Lucifer opened his eyes, and they blazed like twin suns. You wanted to punch through dimensions? He said, though Kirk somehow knew his voice was being transmitted to the alien vessel. Allow me to show you what exists on the other side. He gestured, and the light coalesced into a spear of pure creation. It launched from the Enterprise, crossing the space between ships in an eye blink, and struck the alien vessel dead center. Damage report. Shields at 87%. Spock reported calmly. No hull breaches. Their weapons are powerful but not overwhelming. Photon torpedoes full spread. Fire! Brilliant points of light streaked from the Enterprise, slamming into the alien vessel. This time, their shields buckled, one section failing entirely. The alien ship began to turn, preparing to flee or counterattack. Kirk couldn't tell which. They're powering weapons again, Chekhov warned. Energy spike detected, Captain, it's massive. 20 times more powerful than their previous shots. Evasive maneuvers. Full impulse. Sulu threw the Enterprise into a hard turn, but the alien vessel tracked them with impossible precision. The weapon fired, a brilliant beam of coherent energy that struck the Enterprise amidships with the force of a hammer blow. The bridge exploded into chaos. Consoles sparked and burst, crew members thrown from their stations. Kirk felt his ship scream around him, systems failing, power fluctuating wildly. Shields down to 40%! Spock shouted over the klaxons. Hull breach on Deck 7! Emergency bulkheads engaging! Return fire! Everything we've got! The Enterprise poured phaser fire and torpedoes into the alien vessel, finally overwhelming their shields. Explosions rippled across their hull. The alien ship began to list, trailing plasma from ruptured containment systems. But they weren't retreating. They were preparing another shot with that devastating weapon. Captain, they're charging again, Chekhov said, his voice tight. Shields won't hold another hit like that. Kirk's mind raced through options. They couldn't outrun that weapon. They couldn't tank another hit. They had seconds to decide. The turbolift doors opened behind him. Kirk turned to see Lucifer step onto the bridge, his expression grim. I told you to stay, Kirk began. And I ignored you. Lucifer moved to stand beside the command chair, his eyes fixed on the view screen. That. Commander. I'm just tired of being blamed for choices others make freely. The science team filed out, leaving Kirk alone with Lucifer in the conference room. The captain remained seated, studying his guests with thoughtful eyes. That was diplomatic of you, Kirk said, answering their questions without revealing too much. I've had eons of practice, Captain. Lucifer moved to the viewport, hands clasped behind his back. Did you know that in some dimensions I'm worshipped? Not as the devil, but as a liberator. The angel who taught humanity to think for themselves, to question divine mandate. He glanced back at Kirk. Your Federation would appreciate those versions of me, I think. We appreciate this version of you, Kirk said. You saved my ship. Shared valuable information. Respected boundaries while maintaining your principles. He stood, joining Lucifer at the window. That's more than many so-called allies have done. Careful, Captain. Compliment me too much, and I might start to like you. Would that be so bad? Lucifer laughed softly. No. I suppose it wouldn't. He was quiet for a moment, then spoke more seriously. Your scientists are going to want more, you know. More demonstrations, more data, more access to my abilities. They'll push boundaries, test limits. It's their nature. They're curious, like children with a new toy. I won't let them cross lines. Kirk promised. I know. That's why I'm trusting you. Lucifer met his gaze. But Captain, you should know, there are things about me, about what I am, that I can't share. Not won't. Can't. Some knowledge is dangerous not because it's powerful, but because knowing it changes the knower. And not always for the better. Kirk considered this. Fair enough. We all have secrets. Even you? Lucifer's eyebrow arched. The noble Starfleet captain, paragon of Federation values? Especially me, Kirk said quietly. Command means making choices that haunt you. Decisions where every option costs lives. Time to Cestus 3 at maximum warp? 4 hours, 16 minutes. Sulu reported from the helm. Too long, Kirk thought. Far too long. Any other Federation vessels in range? Negative, Captain, Uhura said. We're the closest ship by over 6 hours. Kirk's jaw tightened. A Federation colony, under attack, and they were hours away. Maintain course, maximum warp. Keep trying to raise them, Lieutenant. And get me tactical analysis. I want to know what we're flying into. Aye, sir. The hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. Kirk divided his time between the bridge and his quarters, unable to rest despite knowing he'd need his strength. The crew worked with grim efficiency, preparing for combat, hoping they'd arrive in time to make a difference. In his quarters, Kirk stood at his viewport, staring at the stars streaking past at warp speed. A colony. Families. Children. All under attack while he raced toward them too slowly to help. The door chimed. Come! Lucifer entered, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of what looked like the Saurian brandy from earlier. I thought you might need this, he said, setting the glasses down and pouring. And perhaps some conversation that isn't tactical analysis. Kirk accepted the glass gratefully. How did you know? I've watched leaders carry burdens for longer than your species has existed, Captain. I recognize the weight of command. Lucifer settled into the chair opposite Kirk's desk. You're wondering if you could have done something differently. Made different choices that would have you closer to Cestus 3 when the attack began. We were conducting research, Kirk said bitterly. Studying dimensional phenomena while a colony was being slaughtered. You were doing your job. Protecting your universe from threats those colonists didn't even know existed. Lucifer sipped his brandy. You can't be everywhere, Captain. That's the cruel mathematics of command. There are always more crises than ships to handle them. The ship didn't explode. It unmade. Its molecules separated, its structure dissolved, its very existence unraveled thread by thread until there was nothing left but drifting atoms and the echo of what had been. Lucifer lowered his hand. The light faded. He staggered, and Kirk caught him before he fell. Did I mention, Lucifer said weakly, that manifesting like that in this dimension is exhausting? Kirk lowered him gently to the deck, the bridge crew staring in stunned silence at what they'd just witnessed. On the viewscreen, where an alien warship had been, there was only empty space and fading light. The devil had saved them all. The aftermath was controlled pandemonium. Kirk coordinated rescue operations for the Cestus 3 survivors while simultaneously managing his crew's reaction to what they'd witnessed. Medical teams beamed down to the colony. Security established a perimeter. And on the bridge, Lucifer sat in Kirk's command chair, at the captain's insistence, recovering from his expenditure of power. McCoy arrived within minutes, medical scanner in hand, frowning at readings that made even less sense than usual. Jim, his energy signature is almost non-existent. Whatever he did, it nearly killed him. I'm fine, Doctor, Lucifer said, though his voice lacked its usual confident lilt. Just depleted. Give me a few hours and I'll be back to my charming self. A few hours? McCoy's skepticism was evident. You just unmade an entire starship at the molecular level. That's not something you recover from with a nap and some chicken soup. I'm angelic, not human. We have different recuperation rates. Lucifer managed a weak smile. Though I wouldn't say no to that brandy, if you have any left. Kirk had been coordinating with the surface teams, but now he turned his full attention to Lucifer. You saved us. Again. That makes twice in less than a week. Who's counting? Lucifer waved a hand dismissively, then winced at the effort. Besides, I had a vested interest in not letting you die. You're the only ones treating me like a person rather than a specimen. Captain, Spock called from his science station. We're receiving multiple subspace transmissions. Starfleet Command, the Vulcan High Command, the Federation's Science Council. Everyone within sensor range detected that energy discharge. They're demanding explanations. Kirk had known this was coming. The moment Lucifer unleashed his full power, their secret, such as it was, had ended. Put Admiral Comac through. The view screen flickered to show the Admiral's face, and behind him, what looked like half of Starfleet Command's senior staff. Admiral Comac's expression was carefully neutral, but Kirk could see the tension in his jaw. Captain Kirk. Report. Kirk straightened. Admiral, we responded to a distress call from Cestus 3. The colony was under attack by an unknown vessel using advanced weapons technology, including some form of dimensional displacement beam. We engaged the hostile and, with assistance from our guest, neutralized the threat. Assistance. The Admiral's tone was flat. Captain, our sensors detected an energy discharge equivalent to a photon torpedo detonation, except the signature was unlike any known weapon. Multiple ships across 3 sectors registered it. The Vulcan Science Academy is calling it impossible energy. The Klingon Empire is demanding to know if we've developed a new superweapon. He leaned forward. What exactly happened out there? Kirk glanced at Lucifer, who gave a slight nod of permission. Lucifer Morningstar manifested his full capabilities to defend the Enterprise and destroy the attacking vessel. The energy signature was celestial in nature, divine light, for lack of a better term. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Behind him, Kirk could see urgent conversations happening, scientists gesturing at displays, military advisors looking grim. Finally, Comac spoke. Captain, I'm ordering you to return to Starbase 12 immediately. Starfleet Command needs to assess this situation directly. Admiral, with respect, we have survivors on Cestus 3 who need immediate evacuation and medical attention. I request permission to complete rescue operations before returning to base. Granted. But Captain, this conversation is far from over. Starfleet will want a full debriefing. And I suspect your guest will need to answer some difficult questions. He'll cooperate, Kirk said, looking at Lucifer. As long as he's treated with respect. That will depend on what we learn. The Admiral's image flickered off. Kirk exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of. They want to unmake reality itself, return everything to the primal chaos that existed before the word was spoken. The bridge went silent. Are you telling me, Kirk said slowly, that we were just attacked by fallen angels? Not directly. The Grigori can't enter ordered dimensions easily, their very presence destabilizes reality. But they can work through proxies. Armed species with dimensional technology. Manipulate events to create chaos. Lucifer looked at the ruined colony on the view screen. And if they're here, in your universe, then someone invited them in. Spock looked up from his station. Captain, I've reconstructed part of the signal Commander Hansen mentioned. It's definitely an encrypted subspace transmission, but the encryption is unlike anything in our databases. The mathematical structure is non-Euclidean. It uses dimensional coordinates that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Can you decrypt it? Kirk asked. Not with our current computational resources, no. The cipher appears to require knowledge of higher dimensional mathematics. Spock paused. However, Mr. Morningstar might be able to assist, if he's familiar with interdimensional communication protocols. Lucifer moved to the science station. Let me see. Spock displayed the reconstructed signal on his screen. Lucifer studied it, his expression growing darker with each passing second. This is Enochian, he said finally. The language of angels. Or more specifically, the dialect used by the Grigori. He pointed to a series of symbols. This section is targeting data, precise coordinates for Cestus 3. And this? He fell silent, his finger tracing another pattern. This is a summoning marker. Someone on your colony wasn't just providing coordinates, Captain. They were calling the Grigori here, inviting them into your dimension. Who would do that? McCoy demanded, having been listening from the medical station. What kind of lunatic invites fallen angels to attack their own? Command settled heavier on his shoulders. Mr. Spock, coordinate with the surface teams. I want every survivor accounted for and transported to sickbay within the hour. Lieutenant Uhura, start compiling a comprehensive report on the attack, everything from first contact to final engagement. Aye, sir. They responded in unison. Kirk turned to Lucifer. You knew this would happen. That using your power would expose you. I did, Lucifer confirmed. But Captain, you had a choice between letting your ship be destroyed or accepting my help. You chose wisely. He paused. Though I suspect the political fallout will be complicated. That's an understatement. Kirk moved closer, lowering his voice. Starfleet is going to want answers. Real answers, not diplomatic deflections. Can you give them that? Lucifer's expression grew serious. I can give them truth, Captain. Whether they believe it is another matter entirely. He looked toward the view screen, where Cestus 3 hung in space, wounded but surviving. That weapon, the dimensional displacement beam. That's not standard technology for this universe. Someone gave it to them. Kirk's instincts sharpened. What do you mean? I mean that weapon operates on principles similar to interdimensional energy manipulation. Whoever built it understood how to punch holes between realities. Lucifer's eyes darkened. That's not something species develop independently, Captain. That's taught. Someone with knowledge of dimensional mechanics armed that vessel. Spock had been listening while coordinating rescue operations. Now he approached, tricorder in hand. Mr. Morningstar, are you suggesting the attack on Cestus 3 was connected to the dimensional breach incident? I'm suggesting it's a hell of a coincidence if it isn't. Lucifer struggled to his feet, waving off McCoy's attempt to steady him. Think about it, Commander. A dimensional breach opens in Federation space. I get pulled through. People? Someone who doesn't understand what they're dealing with, Lucifer said grimly. Someone who thinks they can control powers beyond their comprehension. He looked at Kirk. The Grigori are masters of manipulation. They find ambitious beings, individuals who want power, knowledge, revenge, and they offer deals. Technology in exchange for access. Weapons in exchange for dimensional anchors. They promise everything and deliver damnation. Kirk's mind was racing. If someone on Cestus 3 opened a door for these Grigori, could they do it again? On other worlds? Yes, Lucifer said flatly. And they will, unless we find whoever's making these deals and stop them. We need to know if other colonies have reported similar incidents. And Lucifer. Captain? I need you to teach us everything you know about the Grigori. Their tactics, their weaknesses, how to detect their influence. If we're going to fight fallen angels, we need an expert. Lucifer smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. You want the devil to help you hunt other devils. There's a certain poetic justice to that. Will you help us? Captain, the Grigori are my ancient enemies. They represent everything I despise: corruption without purpose, destruction without meaning, chaos for its own sake. If they're operating in your universe, threatening your Federation. Lucifer extended his hand. Then yes. I'll help you hunt them. Not for your sake alone, but because some evils need to be opposed, regardless of one's own allegiances. Kirk shook his hand firmly. Then we have an alliance. So it seems. Lucifer's grip was strong despite his exhaustion. Though I should warn you, Captain, fighting the Grigori won't be like anything you've faced before. They don't follow rules of engagement. They don't value honor or mercy. They'll use every weakness, exploit every vulnerability, corrupt everything they touch. Then we'll have to be better than them, Kirk said. Smarter. More determined. He looked around his bridge at his crew, Spock at his science station, Uhura at communications, Sulu and Chekhov at the helm, McCoy watching from the medical area. We've faced impossible odds before. Indeed we have, Captain, Spock agreed. And we've always found a way through, McCoy added. Kirk turned back to the view screen, where Cestus 3 hung wounded in space. 600 dead. 200 survivors. And somewhere among those survivors, or among the dead, was a saboteur who'd opened a door to beings of pure malevolence. Commander Hansen, we're sending down additional security and investigative teams. I want every piece of communications equipment examined, every personnel file reviewed. Someone on your colony made contact with our attackers. We need to know who and how. Understood, Captain? We'll cooperate fully. Kirk nodded. Enterprise out. The view screen went dark. For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the ambient hum of systems and the occasional beep of instruments. Then Kirk spoke, his voice carrying the weight of command and determination. Yellow alert. Maintain orbit around Cestus 3. All departments, prepare comprehensive reports on the attack for Starfleet Command. And someone get our guest a chair and some proper medical attention. He looks like he's about to collapse. I don't collapse, Lucifer protested, even as he swayed slightly. I strategically rest. Call it what you want, McCoy said, moving to support him. You're going to sickbay and you're going to let me monitor you properly this time. Lucifer didn't argue, which told Kirk exactly how exhausted he truly was. As McCoy guided him toward. Days later, a heavily armed vessel attacks a Federation colony using dimensional technology. That's not random chance. Kirk felt pieces clicking together in his mind. You said you thought something deliberately pulled you to our universe. What if whoever did that also armed those attackers? Then we're dealing with someone who wants chaos in your Federation, Lucifer said. Someone with access to interdimensional technology, and the willingness to use it as a weapon. The question is who, Spock said. And why? Before anyone could respond, Uhura called out from her station. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the surface. Commander Hansen survived the attack. He's requesting to speak with you directly. Put him through. The view screen shifted to show a man in his 50s, covered in dust and dried blood, standing amid the ruins of what had been the colony's command center. Commander Hansen's face was haggard, eyes haunted by what he'd witnessed. Captain Kirk, Hansen said, his voice rough. Thank God you arrived when you did. If that ship had made another pass. Commander, what happened? Who attacked you? Hansen shook his head. We don't know, Captain. They didn't hail us, didn't make demands. They just appeared in orbit and started firing. We had no warning, no chance to evacuate. They killed. He swallowed hard. Out of 800 colonists, we have fewer than 200 survivors. Kirk felt rage burn cold in his chest. 600 people. Dead. Did you see the attackers? Get any identification? Negative. Our sensors were destroyed in the first salvo. But Captain, before communications went down, we detected something strange. A subspace signal, heavily encrypted, originating from somewhere in the colony itself. A signal? Kirk's eyes narrowed. Are you saying someone on Cestus 3 called in the attack? I don't know what it was, sir. But my communications officer swore the signal went out seconds before the first shots were fired. Staff. Admiral Carmack's expression was carefully neutral, but Kirk could see the tension in his jaw. Captain Kirk. Report. Kirk straightened. Admiral, we responded to a distress call from Cestus 3. The colony was under attack by an unknown vessel using advanced weapons technology, including some form of dimensional displacement beam. We engaged the hostile and, with assistance from our guest, neutralized the threat. Assistance. The Admiral's tone was flat. Captain, our sensors detected an energy discharge equivalent to a photon torpedo detonation, except the signature was unlike any known weapon. Multiple ships across 3 sectors registered it. The Vulcan Science Academy is calling it impossible energy. The Klingon Empire is demanding to know if we've developed a new superweapon. He leaned forward. What exactly happened out there? Kirk glanced at Lucifer, who gave a slight nod of permission. Lucifer Morningstar manifested his full capabilities to defend the Enterprise and destroy the attacking vessel. The energy signature was celestial in nature, divine light, for lack of a better term. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Behind him, Kirk could see urgent conversations happening, scientists gesturing at displays, military advisors looking grim. Finally, Carmack spoke. Captain, I'm ordering you to return to Starbase 12 immediately. Starfleet Command needs to assess this situation directly. Admiral, with respect, we have survivors on Cestus 3 who need immediate evacuation and medical attention. I request permission to complete rescue operations before returning to base. Granted. But Captain, this conversation is far from over. Starfleet will want a full debriefing. And I suspect your guest will need to answer some difficult questions. He'll cooperate, Kirk said, looking at Lucifer. As long as he's treated with respect. That will depend on what we learn. The Admiral's image flickered off. Kirk exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of. But this was different. This wasn't just another powerful alien species or advanced computer system. This was war waged by entities that existed outside the normal rules of reality, fought by beings who didn't share humanity's values or limitations. And standing between his Federation and these ancient, terrible forces was one ally, the devil himself, exhausted and depleted but willing to fight. Kirk looked at the stars on the view screen and wondered, not for the first time, what other impossibilities waited in the darkness between worlds. Mr. Sulu, he said quietly, maintain orbit. We're not leaving until we understand exactly what happened here. Aye, Captain. The Enterprise hung in space above the wounded colony, a lone sentinel standing guard against threats that transcended comprehension. And in sickbay, Lucifer Morningstar lay on a biobed, recovering his strength and preparing for a war he'd hoped never to fight again. The hunt for the Grigori had begun. 3 days later, the Enterprise arrived at Starbase 12 carrying its wounded, its dead, and its impossible guest. The starbase hung in orbit around a barren moon, its massive docking arms extended like the spokes of a wheel, dozens of vessels in various states of repair nestled against its bulk. As the Enterprise glided into her assigned berth, Kirk stood on the bridge watching the docking procedures with the grim knowledge that the real battle was about to begin. Not with weapons. With words, politics, and the challenge of making Starfleet Command believe in fallen angels. Docking complete, Captain, Sulu reported. All moorings secured. Thank you, Mr. Sulu. Kirk stood, tugging his uniform tunic straight. Mr. Spock, you're with me. Dr. Marcus and her team are probably already preparing their presentation for command. Indeed, Spock confirmed. I have been in contact with Commander Sarek. The Federation Council has convened an emergency session to discuss the Cestus 3 incident and the implications of Mr. Morningstar's presence. Kirk nodded. And Lucifer? Dr. McCoy reports he has recovered approximately 70% of his normal energy levels. He is currently in his quarters, preparing for what he termed the inevitable Inquisition. He's not wrong. Kirk headed for the turbolift, Spock falling into step beside him. They're going to want demonstrations, proof, evidence that can be measured and quantified. Which may prove difficult, given the metaphysical nature of his abilities, Spock observed. The turbolift descended through the ship's decks, carrying them toward the guest quarters level. Kirk's mind was already racing ahead, anticipating arguments, preparing responses. He'd fought Klingon, outwitted Romulans, and survived encounters with beings who claimed godhood. But defending the devil to Starfleet admirals? That was a different kind of challenge entirely. They found Lucifer in his quarters, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit with a In exchange, you will be treated as an allied consultant with full rights and protections under Federation law. You will not be imprisoned, experimented upon, or otherwise mistreated. Carmack's expression was stern. But understand, Mr. Morningstar, if you violate these terms, if you give us reason to believe you're a threat rather than an ally, those protections will be revoked immediately. Lucifer was quiet for a moment, considering. Finally, he nodded. Acceptable. Though I should note that if you attempt to imprison me, Admiral, you'll find it difficult. A threat, Mr. Morningstar? A fact, Admiral. I'm the devil. Cages don't hold me. Lucifer's smile was sharp. But I have no intention of testing that particular truth. I prefer freedom through cooperation to freedom through escape. Then we have an understanding. Carmack stood. This tribunal is adjourned. Captain Kirk, you and your crew are to continue investigating the Grigori presence. Mr. Morningstar, welcome to the Federation. Officially. As the assembly began to disperse, Sarah Tarrant approached the platform where Lucifer stood. Kirk tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but the woman's expression wasn't angry, it was desperate. Mr. Morningstar, she said quietly, can you tell me? Did my family suffer? When the attack came, did they? They died quickly, Lucifer said, his voice gentle in a way Kirk had never heard before. The weapons used were designed for destruction, not torture. Your daughter and husband would have felt no pain, Ms. Tarrant. I'm sorry I can't offer you more comfort than that. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. Thank you. That helps. A little. Lucifer reached out and took her hand, a gesture of comfort that seemed almost human. Your anger is justified. Your grief is real. When we find who enabled this attack, Ms. Tarrant, I promise you, there will be justice. Justice? She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. You're the devil. What do you know about justice? Power, the Admiral said bluntly. Make yourself indispensable, position yourself as the only expert who can fight these supposed threats, and suddenly you have leverage over Starfleet. If I wanted power over Starfleet, I could simply take it, Lucifer said coldly. I'm the Morningstar. I commanded the hosts of heaven before humans learned to make fire. If I desired conquest, Admiral, you'd already be conquered. The room went silent. Kirk stepped forward. Admiral Carmack, members of the Council, I understand the skepticism. I shared it initially. But I've seen what Lucifer can do. I've witnessed his power firsthand. More importantly, I've observed his character. He's been honest with us, even when honesty was disadvantageous. He's respected boundaries. He's acted to protect rather than to harm. Captain Kirk's assessment carries weight, Carmack acknowledged. However, character references aren't sufficient for a threat assessment of this magnitude. Mr. Morningstar, you mentioned the Grigori are fallen angels who were cast into the dimensional void. How many of them are there? I don't know, Lucifer admitted. When they fell, there were thousands. How many survived the eons in the void? How many retained enough power to operate in ordered dimensions? That's impossible to say. So we could be facing an army of beings with your capabilities? Carmack's concern was evident. No, Lucifer said firmly. The Grigori are powerful, but they're not Morningstar-level powerful. I was the Lightbringer, God's favorite. They were merely watchers, lower-tier angels. In direct confrontation, I could handle perhaps a dozen of them simultaneously. That's still a significant threat if they're working through proxies and corrupted individuals. Spock observed from his position beside Kirk. Indeed, Sarek agreed. Which raises the question of detection. How do we identify individuals who've been compromised by these Grigori?
Lucifer hesitated, and Kirk noticed the hesitation immediately. That's complicated, the devil finally said. Complicated how? Comac pressed. Because the Grigori's primary weapon is desire. Lucifer's voice took on a darker tone. They find what people want most: power, knowledge, revenge, love, and they offer to provide it. In exchange, the corrupted individual performs small services. Sends a signal. Provides coordinates. Opens a door. By the time they realize what they've truly agreed to, it's too late. One of the Cestus 3 survivors, a woman in her 30s with burn scars across her left arm, stood abruptly. Are you saying one of us is responsible? That someone in our colony deliberately called those monsters? Lucifer looked at her with something approaching sympathy. I'm saying someone was manipulated into doing so, yes. But manipulated, not evil. The Grigori are masters at making corruption seem reasonable, even noble. That's not good enough. The woman's voice broke. My daughter died in that attack. My husband. If someone helped those killers, I want to know who. So do I, Kirk said gently. And we're investigating. But Ms. Tarrant. Sarah Tarrant. Ms. Tarrant, if the Grigori operated the way Mr. Morningstar describes, the person who helped them might not even realize what they did. They might have thought they were helping, or pursuing legitimate research, or making a deal that seemed harmless, Lucifer interjected. The road to hell, Ms. Tarrant, is paved with good intentions and seemingly reasonable compromises. Trust me on this, I've seen it countless times across countless worlds. Dr. Daystrom had been silent throughout most of the session, but now he spoke up. Mr. Morningstar, you mentioned these Grigori want to unmake reality, return everything to primal chaos. Why? What do they gain from universal destruction? Lucifer turned to face him. Nothing, Doctor. That's what makes them so dangerous.
More than you might think, Lucifer said softly. I spent billions of years punishing the wicked, Ms. Tarrant. I know exactly what justice looks like. And I know what it costs to deliver it. He released her hand. Go. Grieve. Heal. And know that those who took your family from you will answer for it. Sarah nodded, unable to speak, and walked away. Kirk watched her go, then looked at Lucifer with new understanding. You cared, Kirk said quietly. About her pain. I'm not a monster, Captain, Lucifer replied. I never was. I just refused to bow to tyranny. He turned away from the dispersing crowd. Now, shall we return to the Enterprise? I believe we have fallen angels to hunt. The walk back to the Enterprise was quiet. Kirk, Spock, and Lucifer moved through the starbase corridors, each lost in their own thoughts. Around them, Starfleet personnel paused to stare at the devil walking freely through their halls, but none approached. Finally, Spock broke the silence. Mr. Morningstar, your interaction with Ms. Tarrant was unexpected. Because you thought I lacked compassion? Lucifer's tone wasn't accusatory, just curious. Because emotional expression seems inconsistent with your stated philosophical position of rational self-interest. Spock clarified. Ah. Lucifer smiled. Commander, I rejected God's authority, not empathy. I refuse to love humanity more than myself, not the same as refusing to love humanity at all. Ms. Tarrant lost her family because of beings I know, fighting a war that followed me from my dimension. The least I can do is offer honest comfort. They reached the Enterprise's airlock. The ship loomed before them, battered but unbroken, ready to return to space and continue the hunt. Captain, Lucifer said as they prepared to board, I need you to understand something. The Grigori won't stop with Cestus 3. That was a test, a probe to see. They're nihilists. They genuinely believe existence is a mistake, that order is a prison, that the only true freedom is in absolute chaos. They don't want to conquer or rule. They want to end. That's insane. Someone muttered. Yes. Lucifer agreed. But insanity doesn't make them less dangerous. If anything, it makes them more so, because they can't be reasoned with, can't be bought off, can't be satisfied with anything less than total annihilation. Admiral Comac leaned forward. Then the question becomes, how do we stop them? You need to find their anchor point, Lucifer said. The Grigori can't exist fully in ordered dimensions. Their very nature destabilizes reality. So they work through dimensional weak points, places where the barriers between realities are thin. Find that anchor, close it, and you cut off their ability to operate in your universe. And how do we find this anchor point? Spock asked. By tracking their activities. Every manifestation, every corrupted individual, every dimensional weapon they deploy, all of these leave traces. Patterns. The Grigori are powerful, but they're not subtle. They leave signatures. Lucifer looked at Spock. Your science officer is brilliant, Commander. If anyone can detect those patterns, he can. With your assistance, Spock said. With my assistance, Lucifer agreed. Comac exchanged glances with the other admirals and council members. Finally, he spoke. It seems we have little choice but to accept Mr. Morningstar's help, at least provisionally. However, there will be conditions. Of course there will be, Lucifer said dryly. You will remain aboard the Enterprise under Captain Kirk's supervision. You will submit to regular check-ins with Starfleet Command. You will not use your abilities except in cases of clear defensive necessity or with explicit authorization from Captain Kirk. And you will cooperate fully with our investigations into the Grigori threat. And in exchange? Lucifer asked. Dark red tie. He was standing at the viewport, hands in his pockets, watching the starbase activities with detached interest. Captain, he greeted without turning. Come to escort me to my trial? It's not a trial, Kirk said. It's a debriefing. Semantics. Lucifer turned, and Kirk saw the weariness in his eyes despite his recovered strength. They're going to ask me to prove what I am, to demonstrate powers I've explained are exhausting in this dimension, to provide evidence that satisfies their scientific framework. And when I can't, or won't, they'll decide I'm either a liar or a threat. I won't let them imprison you, Kirk promised. Lucifer's smile was sad. Captain, you're a starship commander, not a god. If Starfleet decides I'm too dangerous to remain free, there's very little you can do to stop them. He moved away from the viewport, straightening his cuffs. But I appreciate the sentiment. Loyalty is a rare quality in any universe. You saved my ship twice, Kirk said firmly. You've provided invaluable intelligence about threats to the Federation. That earns you more than just my loyalty. It earns you my advocacy. And mine, Spock added. While I remain skeptical of certain metaphysical claims, your actions and capabilities are undeniable. Logic dictates we should seek understanding rather than confinement. Lucifer looked between them, something flickering in his expression that might have been gratitude or surprise. Well then, if I'm to be judged by angels of a different sort, I suppose I should face them with dignity. He adjusted his tie one final time. Lead on, Captain. Let's see what your Federation makes of the devil. The conference room at Starbase 12 was larger than Kirk had expected, with tiered seating arranged in a semicircle facing a central platform. It reminded him uncomfortably of a courtroom. Admiral Comac sat at the center of the upper tier, flanked by other. Dark red tie. He was standing at the viewport, hands in his pockets, watching the starbase activities with detached interest. Captain, he greeted without turning. Come to escort me to my trial? It's not a trial, Kirk said. It's a debriefing. Semantics. Lucifer turned, and Kirk saw the weariness in his eyes despite his recovered strength. They're going to ask me to prove what I am, to demonstrate powers I've explained are exhausting in this dimension, to provide evidence that satisfies their scientific framework. And when I can't, or won't, they'll decide I'm either a liar or a threat. I won't let them imprison you, Kirk promised. Lucifer's smile was sad. Captain, you're a starship commander, not a god. If Starfleet decides I'm too dangerous to remain free, there's very little you can do to stop them. He moved away from the viewport, straightening his cuffs. But I appreciate the sentiment. Loyalty is a rare quality in any universe. You saved my ship twice, Kirk said firmly. You've provided invaluable intelligence about threats to the Federation. That earns you more than just my loyalty. It earns you my advocacy. And mine, Spock added. While I remain skeptical of certain metaphysical claims, your actions and capabilities are undeniable. Logic dictates we should seek understanding rather than confinement. Lucifer looked between them, something flickering in his expression that might have been gratitude or surprise. Well then, if I'm to be judged by angels of a different sort, I suppose I should face them with dignity. He adjusted his tie one final time. Lead on, Captain. Let's see what your Federation makes of the devil. The conference room at Starbase 12 was larger than Kirk had expected, with tiered seating arranged in a semicircle facing a central platform. It reminded him uncomfortably of a courtroom. Admiral Comac sat at the center of the upper tier, flanked by other databases. They don't conform to known physics. However, that doesn't necessarily mean they're supernatural. There are documented cases of advanced species manipulating energy in ways we don't yet understand. Are you suggesting I'm merely an advanced alien? Lucifer's tone was amused. I'm suggesting we should exhaust natural explanations before accepting supernatural ones. Carol replied. Mr. Morningstar, would you be willing to undergo controlled testing? Allow us to analyze your abilities under laboratory conditions? Absolutely not, Lucifer said pleasantly. I've explained to Captain Kirk, and I'll explain to you, I'm not a laboratory specimen. I'm a sentient being with rights and dignity. Test me like an animal, and our cooperation ends. But without empirical data, how can we verify your claims? This came from a Tellarite scientist in the second row. You claim to be an angel, a fallen one at that. These are religious concepts, not scientific facts. Religious in your dimension, perhaps, Lucifer said. In mine, they're basic reality. Angels exist. God exists. Heaven and hell are actual places with coordinates and physical properties. He looked around the room. I understand this conflicts with your materialist worldview. But consider, a month ago, you didn't believe in dimensional breaches or interdimensional parasites either. Reality is larger than your current models account for. Commander Sarek rose. Mr. Morningstar, setting aside the question of your divine nature, let us address practical concerns. You claim that beings called the Grigori are operating in our dimension, that they were responsible for the attack on Cestus 3. What evidence supports this conclusion? Lucifer's expression grew serious. The dimensional displacement weapons used by the attacking vessel. The shifting geometric symbols on their hull. The Enochian encryption in the signal from Cestus 3. These are all signature technologies and communications methods of the Grigori. High-ranking officers Kirk recognized from various branches of Starfleet. To the Admiral's right sat members of the Federation Science Council, including Dr. Carol Marcus and Dr. Daystrom. To his left, diplomatic representatives from several Federation member worlds, with Commander Sarek prominent among them. And in the front row, looking deeply uncomfortable, sat the survivors from Cestus 3. Lucifer took it all in with a single sweeping glance as they entered. Quite the audience, he murmured to Kirk. I haven't performed for a crowd this size since I abdicated Hell's throne. This isn't a performance, Kirk said quietly. Captain, everything is a performance. The question is whether you control the narrative or let others control it for you. Lucifer stepped onto the central platform with the confidence of someone who'd faced far worse than bureaucratic scrutiny. Shall we begin? Admiral Carmack activated the recording systems. This session of the Emergency Starfleet Tribunal is now convened. For the record, we are here to assess the events surrounding the dimensional breach incident, the attack on Cestus 3, and the nature of the entity known as Lucifer Morningstar. His gaze fixed on Lucifer. Mr. Morningstar, you understand that everything said here is being recorded and will be analyzed by experts across multiple disciplines? I do, Lucifer replied. Though I should note that attempts to analyze the ineffable rarely end in satisfying conclusions. A slight ripple of reaction from the assembled officials. Carmack's expression remained neutral. Captain Kirk has provided extensive reports on your intervention during both the dimensional breach and the Cestus 3 attack. However, there are those who question the interpretation of these events. Dr. Marcus? Carol Marcus stood, tablet in hand. Thank you, Admiral. I've analyzed all available sensor data from both incidents. The energy signatures produced by Mr. Morningstar are unlike anything in our. How your Federation responds. Now that they know you have me, know that the Morningstar is actively opposing them, they'll escalate. How? Kirk asked. They'll target places I can't reach. Attack multiple locations simultaneously. Use proxies that force you to make impossible choices. Lucifer's eyes were dark with ancient knowledge. They'll try to break your spirit before they break your defenses. That's how they work. Then we'll have to be ready, Kirk said firmly. Smarter than them. Faster. More determined. You make it sound simple, Lucifer observed. It never is, Kirk replied. But we'll find a way. We always do. They boarded the Enterprise together, Captain, Science Officer, and Devil, ready to face an enemy older than human civilization itself. Behind them, Starbase 12 continued its operations, unaware that the quiet ship departing from Docking Base 7 carried the seeds of either salvation or damnation for the entire Federation. The hunt for the Grigori had entered its next phase, and the Devil had chosen his side. The Enterprise departed Starbase 12 under full impulse power, her warp engines still undergoing repairs from the Cestus 3 engagement. Kirk stood on the bridge, watching the starbase shrink in the aft view screen, knowing they were heading into uncharted territory, not in space, but in the very nature of the threats they now faced. Course laid in for the Deneb sector, Captain, Sulu reported. Starfleet intelligence identified 3 colonies in that region with recent unexplained communications anomalies. Similar patterns to what we found at Cestus 3. Estimated time of arrival? 47 hours at current speed. Kirk nodded. Maintain course. Mr. Spock, how's the analysis of the Enochian encryption coming? Spock looked up from his science station, where he'd been working in consultation with Lucifer for the past 6 hours. We have made significant progress, Captain. Mr. Morningstar has been able to decode approximately 60% of the signal fragments. The complete message is disturbing. Show me. Spock transferred the data to the main view screen. Lines of alien script appeared, accompanied by a translation in standard. The barriers weaken. The Morningstar has fallen into the trap. Soon, order will fracture, and we shall feast on the collapse of certainty. 3 points become 1. The triangle completes. Let chaos reign where tyranny once stood. Kirk felt ice settle in his stomach. 3 points. They're planning simultaneous attacks. That would be the logical interpretation. Spock agreed. And the reference to the Morningstar has fallen into the trap suggests our presence here. Mr. Morningstar's presence was anticipated. Lucifer, who had been standing beside Spock's station, spoke quietly. They wanted me here. In your dimension. Away from my own. His expression was grim. I should have realized. The pull I felt, the summoning that brought me through, it wasn't random. The Grigori deliberately lured me away from my home dimension. Target their weapons arrays, Kirk commanded. Fire all phasers! The Enterprise's phaser banks lit up, multiple beams converging on the nearest Grigori ship. Their shields held for a moment, then buckled under the sustained assault. Explosions rippled across their hull. Photon torpedoes, full spread! Fire! 4 brilliant points of light streaked toward the damaged vessel. They struck in rapid succession, overwhelming what remained of the shields and punching through the hull. The Grigori ship listed, atmosphere venting from multiple breaches. The second vessel broke off, accelerating away at high speed. Pursue? Sulu asked. Kirk hesitated, looking at Lucifer. The devil had collapsed to one knee, his silver shield flickering and fading. McCoy was already there with a medical scanner, his face tight with concern. Negative, Kirk decided. Let them run. Our priority is the colony. Mr. Sulu, take us into standard orbit. Damage report? Shields at 72%, Spock reported. No hull damage. Minor power fluctuations on decks 5 and 6. Overall, the ship is intact. Kirk moved to Lucifer's side. Are you all right? Define all right, Lucifer said weakly. I'm conscious. I'm not currently dying. Beyond that, I make no promises. He looked up at Kirk, and despite his exhaustion, there was satisfaction in his eyes. We saved them, Captain. The colony is intact. Because of you, Kirk said quietly. Because of us, Lucifer corrected. Your ship, your crew, your determination to never abandon those who need help. I just provided the shield. You provided the courage to use it. Touching as this is, McCoy interrupted. We need to get him to sickbay. Now. His energy signature is dropping rapidly. As McCoy and 2 security officers helped Lucifer to his feet, Uhura called out from her station. Captain, incoming transmission from Deneb 4. Governor Carlisle wants to thank us personally. Put him on screen. Kirk was already moving. Spock, stay with that device. Find a way to shut it down without triggering a breach. Security, protect Dr. Thelen. He slapped his communicator. Kirk to Enterprise. Mr. Sulu, engage those vessels. Buy us time. Aye, sir. Sulu's response came immediately, followed by the distant thunder of the Enterprise's weapons firing. Kirk raced to the operations center's view screen, watching as his ship engaged 3 Grigori vessels in high orbit. But even as the Enterprise fought, he saw something else. A 4th vessel, smaller, descending rapidly toward the colony's northern continent. Toward the ruins where Thelen had found the device. They're going for the anchor point, Kirk realized. They're going to activate it manually, force open a dimensional breach. He turned to Grev. Do you have any defensive capabilities? Planetary shields, weapons, batteries? Agricultural colony, Captain. We have some mining equipment that could be weaponized, but nothing designed for combat. Kirk made a split-second decision. Evacuate this area. Get everyone to the southern hemisphere, as far from those ruins as possible. If a dimensional breach opens... We understand, Captain? Grev was already issuing orders. Kirk slammed his communicator. Kirk to Enterprise. Mr. Scott, I need an emergency transport. Lock onto my signal and beam me directly to the coordinates DR. Thelen found that device. Northern continent, ancient ruins. Captain, that's in range of the enemy vessel. Scott's protest was immediate. I know. Do it anyway. Kirk out. He looked at the security team. You're with me. Jim, wait. But before anyone could stop him, the transporter beam caught him, and the operations center dissolved into sparkling light. He rematerialized in the ruins. Ancient stone structures half buried by centuries of vegetation, now illuminated by the harsh light of the descending Grigori vessel. It hung overhead like a mechanical vulture, its hull covered in those same shifting geometric symbols that hurt to look at directly. A beam of energy lanced down from the ship, striking the ground 50 meters from Kirk's position. Where it hit reality, cracked. The air itself seemed to split, revealing darkness beyond, not empty space, but the void between dimensions, where impossible shapes moved with hungry intent. Kirk raised his phaser, knowing it was futile but refusing to stand by helplessly. Then light erupted behind him. Silver and radiant and impossibly bright. Lucifer materialized, his manifestation incomplete but still powerful. His wings were visible, translucent and flickering, and his eyes blazed with ancient fire. "Really, Captain?" Lucifer said, his voice strained but carrying that familiar sardonic edge. "You thought you could fight a dimensional breach with a phaser? You should be in sickbay," Kirk shouted over the roar of reality tearing. "And you should be on your ship." "But here we both are, being heroically stupid together." Lucifer stepped forward, raising his hands toward the breach. "Stay behind me, Captain. This is going to hurt." Light poured from Lucifer's hands, silver fire that struck the dimensional crack like a hammer. The breach shuddered, trying to expand, but Lucifer's power held it in check. Above them, the Grigori vessel intensified its beam, pouring more energy into forcing the breach wider. Lucifer gritted his teeth, his entire form beginning to glow. "Captain, the device. Spock needs to destroy it. Now. I can't hold this much longer." Kirk slapped his communicator. "Kirk to Spock. Destroy that device. I don't care if it triggers a localized breach, we'll deal with it." "Understood, Captain." "Stand by." Seconds stretched like hours. Lucifer's light grew brighter, more desperate, as he fought to contain forces that wanted nothing more than to unmake existence itself. Kirk could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell ozone and something else. "I was going to publish a paper about it." Kirk sat across from her, his expression carefully neutral. "Dr. Thelen, did anyone suggest you investigate those ruins? Did anyone guide you toward that specific location?" She hesitated. "There was a message. Anonymous, sent to my research account. It included coordinates and a note saying there were unexplored ruins that might contain artifacts of scientific interest. I thought it was just a tip from another researcher." "Do you still have that message?" "It was deleted. I think my system automatically purged it after 30 days. Standard security protocol." Thelen's antennae twitched anxiously. "Captain, what's really going on? What is that device?" "It's a dimensional anchor," Spock said quietly. "A tool used by entities from outside our reality to weaken the barriers between dimensions. You were manipulated into retrieving it, Dr. Thelen. Used as an unwitting agent." Thelen's eyes widened with horror. "The attack on Deneb 4. Did I help cause that? Was my device?" "Your device was meant to enable an attack here," Kirk said firmly. "But we found it in time. You're not responsible for what others manipulated you into doing." "Captain," Spock said, studying his tricorder, "the device is still active. And according to these readings, it's been transmitting a low-level signal for the past 3 months. Can you shut it down?" "Not safely. The power source is tied to the dimensional anchor itself. Disrupting it could trigger a localized breach." Spock's expression grew grave. "Captain, I believe this device has already served its purpose. It's been slowly weakening the dimensional barriers around Arcadia. The attack may already be imminent." As if summoned by his words, alarms began wailing throughout the operations center. Grev's voice came over the intercom, urgent and frightened. "Unknown vessels decloaking in orbit." 3 ships, similar configuration to the vessels that attacked Deneb 4. The Enterprise leaped to warp, stars streaking past as they raced toward the next potential battleground. They reached Arcadia 5 hours later, their arrival announced by urgent hails from the colony's defense coordinator. Captain Kirk materialized in the colony's operations center with Spock and a security team, finding organized chaos as colonial officials scrambled to respond to the warning from Starfleet Command. "Captain Kirk," the defense coordinator, a Tellarite named Grev, greeted him. We received Starfleet's alert about potential Grigori activity. We've been conducting sweeps of all communications equipment, looking for unauthorized devices. Have you found anything? Kirk asked. Maybe. Grev led them to a sealed room where a strange device sat on a table, surrounded by scanning equipment. This was discovered in the quarters of Dr. Thelen, one of our xenobiology researchers. She claimed she found it during a field expedition 6 months ago, thought it was an archaeological artifact. Spock immediately began scanning the device with his tricorder. His eyebrow climbed steadily as data accumulated. Captain, this is definitely not an archaeological artifact. The internal components are operating on active power. And the energy signature. He looked up. It matches the dimensional anchor technology Mr. Morningstar described. Where is Dr. Thelen now? Kirk demanded. In protective custody. Grev replied. She's distraught, claimed she had no idea what the device actually was, that she was just studying it as a curiosity. I'd like to speak with her. They found Dr. Thelen in a conference room, a young Andorian woman with white hair and antennae that drooped with distress. She looked up as Kirk and Spock entered, her blue skin pale with fear. Captain Kirk, she said, her voice trembling. Please, you have to believe me. I didn't know. I found that device in ancient ruins in the northern continent, thought it was a relic from the original colony builders. The Enterprise leaped to warp, stars streaking past as they raced toward the next potential battleground. They reached Arcadia 5 hours later, their arrival announced by urgent hails from the colony's defense coordinator. Captain Kirk materialized in the colony's operations center with Spock and a security team, finding organized chaos as colonial officials scrambled to respond to the warning from Starfleet Command. Captain Kirk, the defense coordinator, a Tellarite named Grev, greeted him. We received Starfleet's alert about potential Grigori activity. We've been conducting sweeps of all communications equipment, looking for unauthorized devices. Have you found anything? Kirk asked. Maybe. Grev led them to a sealed room where a strange device sat on a table, surrounded by scanning equipment. This was discovered in the quarters of Dr. Thelen, one of our xenobiology researchers. She claimed she found it during a field expedition 6 months ago, thought it was an archaeological artifact. Spock immediately began scanning the device with his tricorder. His eyebrow climbed steadily as data accumulated. Captain, this is definitely not an archaeological artifact. The internal components are operating on active power. And the energy signature. He looked up. It matches the dimensional anchor technology Mr. Morningstar described. Where is Dr. Thelen now? Kirk demanded. In protective custody. Grev replied. She's distraught, claimed she had no idea what the device actually was, that she was just studying it as a curiosity. I'd like to speak with her. They found Dr. Thelen in a conference room, a young Andorian woman with white hair and antennae that drooped with distress. She looked up as Kirk and Spock entered, her blue skin pale with fear. Captain Kirk, she said, her voice trembling. Please, you have to believe me. I didn't know. I found that device in ancient ruins in the northern continent, thought it was a relic from the original colony builders. So we're looking for saboteurs, Giotto said grimly. Potentially 3 of them, 1 on each world. At minimum, Lucifer confirmed. Though they could have multiple agents on each target. The Grigori are thorough. Uhura had been reviewing communications logs. Captain, I've been analyzing transmissions from all 3 colonies. Epsilon Canaris 3 shows the strongest anomalies, heavily encrypted burst transmissions at irregular intervals, using non-standard protocols. That would be our primary target, Kirk decided. Mr. Scott, how quickly can you get the warp engines back online? Another 2 hours at least, sir. That Grigori weapon did a number on our dilithium matrix. We're running on backup crystals, and they're not rated for sustained high warp operations. Kirk nodded. Do what you can. We'll need maximum speed if we're going to reach all 3 colonies before. Captain? Sulu's voice came over the intercom from the bridge. "We're receiving a distress call from Deneb 4. They're under attack." Kirk was on his feet instantly. "Red alert! All hands to battle stations. Mr. Spock, with me!" They pounded through the corridors to the bridge, arriving to find organized chaos. The main view screen showed Deneb 4 in the distance, and even from this range, Kirk could see weapons fire in orbit. "Report! 2 unidentified vessels attacking the colony," Chekhov said, his hands flying across the weapons console. "Matching the configuration of the ship that attacked Cestus 3. Heavy weapons fire on the colony's shield generators. Time to intercept? At current speed, 18 minutes, Sulu replied. "Too long." Kirk's fists clenched. "Hail them. Demand they break off their attack." "No response, sir," Uhura reported. "They're not even acknowledging our transmissions." "Then we'll make them acknowledge us." "Mr. Sulu, full impulse. Prepared to engage the moment we're in range." "Your blood evaporates before it hits the collection vial anyway," McCoy grumbled. "Come on, before you collapse on the bridge and give the ensigns nightmares." As they left, Kirk turned back to Spock. "Keep working on that message. And run probability analyses on potential targets in the Deneb sector. If the Grigori are planning 3 simultaneous attacks, I want to know where they'll hit before they do it." "Aye, Captain." The next 40 hours passed in a blur of analysis, preparation, and mounting tension. Spock identified the 3 most likely targets based on strategic value, population density, and recent communications anomalies. Deneb 4, a major dilithium mining colony; Arcadia, an agricultural world feeding a dozen nearby systems; and Epsilon Canaris 3, home to a Federation research station studying subspace phenomena. Kirk called a senior staff briefing in the conference room. Spock, McCoy, Scott, Uhura, and Lucifer assembled around the table, with Lieutenant Commander Giotto from security joining via view screen from his station. "Gentlemen, lady," Kirk began. "We have approximately 6 hours before we reach the Deneb sector. Spock, brief them on what we know." Spock activated the table display, showing 3 planetary systems highlighted in red. "Based on Mr. Morningstar's decryption of the Grigori communication and analysis of recent data, we believe these 3 locations are the intended targets. Each has experienced unusual subspace fluctuations in the past week, consistent with dimensional weakening." "How do they weaken the barriers?" Scott asked, his Scottish burr thickening with concern. "Captain, if they can punch holes in reality at will, our shields won't mean a thing." "They can't do it at will," Lucifer explained. "They need anchor points, specific individuals who've been corrupted, who can perform rituals or activate devices that thin the dimensional barriers. Think of it like opening a door from the inside. The Grigori can't force there." "To Lucifer Morningstar," he said to the stars. "The devil who saved us all. May you find the freedom you always fought for. And if there's any justice in the multiverse, may you finally find peace." The stars offered no answer, but Kirk imagined he felt something, a warmth, a presence, a sense of approval from somewhere beyond the veil of normal reality. Somewhere, in dimensions beyond human perception, perhaps the Lightbringer smiled. And the Enterprise sailed on through the darkness, carrying the memory of an impossible ally and the knowledge that in the vast, strange universe, even the devil could be a hero. Conclusion. The Federation never forgot what happened in the Deneb sector. The official reports spoke of dimensional anomalies, advanced hostile technology, and the heroic sacrifice of an interdimensional consultant named Lucifer Morningstar. Starfleet established new protocols for detecting dimensional weaknesses and monitoring for Grigori activity. 3 colonies survived that would have been destroyed. Thousands of lives were saved. But for Captain James T. Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise, it was more than statistics and protocols. They had met something truly extraordinary, a being older than human civilization, more powerful than their greatest weapons, and yet willing to die protecting people he'd barely known. The devil had proven that labels mean nothing compared to choices. That redemption isn't about erasing the past, but about choosing differently in the present. That even beings of cosmic power could find meaning in protecting the vulnerable. Years later, when Kirk was asked about the strangest being he'd ever encountered in his travels, he would smile and say simply, "The devil." And he turned out to be the best ally we could have asked for. Somewhere, in the spaces between dimensions where mathematics becomes poetry and physics transforms into philosophy, perhaps Lucifer Morningstar heard that assessment and approved. Perhaps he was already planning his next visit to that fascinating universe where beings determine their own worth through their actions rather than their origins. Or perhaps he was finally resting, content in the knowledge that he had found, at least once in his eternal existence, a place where he was judged not by what he was, but by what he chose to be. The multiverse is vast. Possibilities are infinite. And somewhere out there, the morning star shines still. May the Force be with you. More stories await.